The moment 4-year-old Theo Holloway pointed at the crying woman in the torn wedding dress and whispered, "That's my mama." Every lie told in Red Valley shattered like glass. Jace Holloway, the hardened rancher who'd buried his grief for 4 years, froze as the woman he thought was dead stood breathing before him. Mara Kent had returned, but the men hunting her were close behind, and the secret she carried would either heal this broken family or destroy them forever. Stay with us until the very end, and comment your city below so we can see how far Mara's story reaches across the world. The Ghost in the Wedding Dress. The train screamed into Red Valley Station like a wounded animal, belching steam and cinder ash into the crystalline November air. It was 3:47 in the afternoon, late enough that the platform should have been empty, early enough that the sun still burned cold and white above the Montana peaks. But Martha Yates was there, clutching her market basket, and so was old Vernon Cross with his tobacco-stained beard, and both of them would later swear on their mother's graves that they saw her first. The woman who collapsed, off the eastbound car. She wore a wedding dress. Not the kind you see in Red Valley, where prairie wives make do with their Sunday best and a borrowed veil. This was the kind of dress that belonged in gilded ballrooms, with layers of ivory silk now shredded at the hem, Brussels lace torn and hanging like cobwebs, and a bodice that might once have been pristine but was now stained with soot, blood, and what looked like 4 years of accumulated despair. The woman's dark hair hung in wild tangles around a face so pale it seemed translucent. Her feet were wrapped in rags, the delicate wedding slippers long gone. She carried nothing, no bag, no coat, no hope in her eyes. Just those eyes. Martha Yates would tell anyone who'd listen that those eyes were the worst part. Like she'd seen the devil himself, Martha would say, clutching her shawl. And maybe danced with him a while. The woman took 3 steps onto the platform, looked up at the painted sign that read Red Valley, population 847, and her knees buckled. Vernon moved first, surprisingly fast for a man of 73. He caught her elbow before she hit the ground. "Ma'am? Ma'am, you all right?" She turned those hollow eyes on him, and Vernon actually stepped back. "I'm home," she whispered. "God help me, I'm home." Then she pulled away from him and started walking, a stumbling, determined walk toward Main Street. By the time she reached the Mercantile, half the town was watching. 12 minutes earlier, 3 blocks away, Jace Holloway stood outside Brennan's Feed and Supply, one boot propped on the loading dock, discussing winter hay prices with Tom Brennan in the desultory way of men who'd known each other since childhood and had long since exhausted topics of genuine interest. "I'm saying you're getting robbed at $6 a bale," Tom was insisting, gesturing with a clipboard. "Sherman up in Bozeman will do you $5.50 if you buy in bulk." "Daddy!" The voice cut through the afternoon like a bell. Jace turned to see his son, 4 years and 7 months old, stubborn as a mule, and currently supposed to be with Mrs. Henderson 2 blocks over, running full tilt down the boardwalk, his little boots hammering the wood. "Theo Holloway, you stop right there!" Mrs. Henderson's voice echoed behind him, breathless and irritated. But Theo didn't stop. He never did. He crashed into Jace's legs with the full force of a small cannonball, wrapping both arms around his father's knee. "Daddy! Daddy! There's a princess!" Jace scooped him up with the ease of long practice, settling the boy on his hip. "A princess? You been reading those fairy tales again?" "No, a real one. She got off the train. She's wearing a princess dress, but she's crying and her feet are bleeding, and Mrs. Henderson said not to stare, but I saw her, Daddy. I saw her." Over Theo's shoulder, Jace watched Mrs. Henderson huffing up the street, her face red with exertion and embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Jace," she panted. "He just ran, saw something at the station and took off like a jackrabbit." "It's fine, Eleanor." Jace set Theo down, but kept a firm grip on his hand. "What'd you see, bud?" "The princess, I told you." Tom Brennan laughed. "Kid's got an imagination. Last week he told me there was a dragon in your north pasture." "That was a bull," Theo said with immense dignity. "But this is different. Come see, Daddy." Something in the boy's voice, a tremor that wasn't quite fear but wasn't far from it, made Jace pause. Theo was many things, wild, willful, occasionally mendacious when it came to whether he'd washed behind his ears, but he wasn't prone to genuine upset. "All right," Jace said. "Show me your princess." They found her in front of Cassidy's dress shop. Jace saw the dress first. Impossible not to. That explosion of ruined white silk in the middle of a town where women wore practical calico and men wore dust. Then he saw the crowd. Then he saw Martha Yates with her hand over her mouth, and Vernon Cross looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Then he saw her. The world tilted. It was a physical sensation, like the ground had betrayed him. Jace's vision narrowed to a pinpoint, then expanded too fast, taking in details his brain refused to process. The shape of her shoulders, thinner than he remembered but unmistakable. The way she held her left arm tight against her ribs, protective. The dark hair that used to fall in glossy waves and now hung in matted ropes. The profile, God, that profile. "Mara," he breathed, but it couldn't be. Mara was dead. Mara had been gone for 4 years. Mara had vanished the night after Theo was born, and the sheriff had found her shawl by the river, and everyone said, everyone knew. She turned. Their eyes met across 20 feet of Montana dust. Jace heard a sound, realized it was coming from him, something between a gasp and a growl, and a word he'd buried so deep he thought it had calcified into fossil. "Daddy?" Theo's hand tightened in his. "Daddy, why are you shaking?" He wasn't shaking, he was made of stone. He was a pillar of salt, turning back to look at what he should have let stay buried. Mara took a step toward him. The crowd parted like water. "Jace!" Her voice cracked on his name. "Jace, You're dead." The words came out flat, factual. "You're dead. We had a funeral." "I know." She was crying now, tears cutting clean tracks through the grime on her face. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Who are you?" The question came from Theo, who had stepped slightly in front of Jace's legs, his small body tense with the protective instinct of a child who'd learned too young that the world could take things away. Mara's eyes dropped to the boy. Everything in her face broke. "Theo," she whispered. "Oh, God. Theo, you're so big. How do you know my name?" Suspicion, clear as creek water, in that little voice. Mara sank to her knees in the dirt, heedless of the dress. She was eye level with him now, 5 feet away, but it might as well have been 5 miles. "Because I—" Her voice failed. She tried again. "Because I picked your name. Before you were born. I held you for 7 hours, and then they took me. Enough." Jace's voice cut like an axe through winter wood. He stepped between them, putting his body between Mara and his son. Their son. Jesus Christ. "Enough. Jace, please, I can explain." "Explain." He laughed, and it sounded like breaking glass. "You want to explain? 4 years. 4 years, Mara. We thought you drowned. We thought—" He stopped, aware of the crowd, aware of Theo's small hand fisted in his shirt. "Not here." "Then where?" She was still on her knees, looking up at him with those haunted eyes. "Where can I explain that I was taken, that I was locked away, that I fought every single day to get back to you, to him? Taken." The word was acid. "Taken by who? By what?" "You vanished, Mara. Your father said, 'My father lied.'" The words exploded out of her, loud enough that several people stepped back. "My father sold me like livestock. He dragged me out of our bed while you slept, put a gun to my head, and told me if I ever came back, he'd make sure you and Theo didn't live to see me do it." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Sheriff Pritchard, who'd been standing at the back of the crowd, because where else would he be when drama unfolded, cleared his throat. "Miss Kent. Mrs. Holloway. He cleared his throat again. "Ma'am, I think we better take this somewhere private." The sheriff's office 20 minutes later. The office smelled like old coffee and older regrets. Jace sat in the chair across from Pritchard's desk. Theo perched on his lap, while Mara stood by the window, still in that ruined dress, looking like every ghost story ever told in Red Valley had condensed into human form. Doc Harrison was there too, summoned by someone sensible. He'd tried to examine Mara, but she'd waved him off with a brittle laugh. "I'm not injured. Not anymore." "Ma'am, you're clearly—" I'm fine. She turned from the window, fixing them all with a gaze that had nothing fine about it. I'm home. That's what matters. Mara. Jace's voice was carefully controlled. Theo's head was tucked against his chest. The boy had gone quiet and watchful in the way children do when adults are barely holding it together. Start talking, real slow, and start with why I shouldn't believe you abandoned us. The sound she made wasn't quite a laugh. Because I didn't. Jace, that night, the night I disappeared, it was October 14th, 3 weeks after Theo was born. Do you remember? I remember every goddamn day since you left. I didn't leave. I woke up with a gun barrel pressed under my chin. My father, Silas Kent, and 2 men I'd never seen before. They gagged me, Jace, tied my hands, carried me out of our house while you slept 10 feet away. Jace's arms tightened around Theo. That's not... Your father was in Denver. He sent a telegram. After you disappeared, he sent a telegram saying... Saying what? That I'd run away? That I'd always been unstable? That poor Jace Holloway was better off without his mad wife? Her voice dripped venom. Let me guess. He offered to take Theo, said the boy would be better raised by proper family back east. The way Jace's face went white told her she'd hit target. How did you... Because that was the plan, Jace. She was shouting now, past caring, past fear. Take me away, make me disappear, then swoop in and take my son. Make it look like mercy, like charity. Sheriff Pritchard held up both hands. Miss Kent, it's Holloway, Mara Holloway. I don't care if there's paperwork saying otherwise. Mara, the sheriff tried again. These are serious accusations. Your father's a wealthy man, connected. If what you're saying is true, if? She whirled on him. You think I tore up a $2,000 wedding dress for fun? You think I walked barefoot across 3 states because I was bored? Doc Harrison spoke up quietly. What wedding dress, Mara? She looked down at herself, seeming to notice the dress for the first time, and her face twisted into something awful. The one I wore when Silas Kent forced me to marry Dorian Crane. The name dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Jace went very, very still. Dorian Crane, the railroad man. Steel magnate, actually, but yes, him. Mara's voice had gone flat, drained of inflection. My father owed him money, a lot of money. Gambling debts, business debts, debts that would have ruined the Kent family name if they came due. So they made a deal. Silas would provide Dorian with a young, respectable wife. Dorian would forgive the debts. You're saying your father sold you. I'm saying my father sold me on October 14th, 1881, at gunpoint, and I spent the next 4 years trying to escape. She met Jace's eyes. I didn't run from you. I ran back to you. Every mile, every lie I told, every window I climbed out of, it was all to get back to you. Theo stirred against Jace's chest. His voice was small. Did you really pick my name? Mara's face crumpled. Yes, baby. Yes, Theo Alexander Holloway. It means gift of God and defender of men, because you were both. You are both. Do you like horses? The question was so abrupt, so achingly childlike, that Mara actually laughed, a wet, broken sound. I love horses. We have 7, and a dog named Biscuit, and chickens, but Daddy says they're stupid. Chickens are stupid, Jace muttered. Do you want to meet them? Theo was warming up now, the natural resilience of childhood asserting itself. The horses, not the chickens. Well, you can meet the chickens too if you want, but they bite. Theo, Jace started. I would love to meet them, Mara said quietly. Then to Jace, if that's allowed. The room went silent again. Jace looked at her, really looked at her. At the scars on her wrists where rope had worn away skin, at the hollow of her cheeks, at the way she held herself like a person who'd learned to be ready to run at any moment, at the desperate hope in her eyes when she looked at Theo. Sheriff, he said finally, you got any actual business here? Any laws broken that need addressing? Pritchard scratched his jaw. Well now, that's complicated. If Mrs. Holloway was taken against her will, held against her will, forced into a marriage against her will, that's kidnapping at minimum. Human trafficking, arguably, but we'd need evidence, witnesses, and going up against Silas Kent. He trailed off meaningfully. I have evidence, Mara said quietly. They all turned to her. The marriage certificate. Forged. I never signed it willingly, but it exists. Letters between my father and Dorian Crane discussing the arrangement. Medical records from the private sanatorium where Dorian kept me when I got difficult. And she took a shaking breath. And this. She reached into the torn bodice of the dress and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. With careful fingers, she unwrapped it, a lock of dark hair tied with a blue ribbon. I cut this from Theo's head the night he was born, she whispered, before they took me. It's all I had of him. I carried it through everything. Every locked room, every threat, every time Dorian... She stopped. I carried it, so I'd remember why I had to survive. Theo reached out and touched the lock of hair with one finger. That's mine? That's yours, baby. Can I have it back? Mara's face did something complicated. Then she smiled, a real smile, the first anyone had seen. It's always been yours. I was just keeping it safe. She handed it to him, and Theo clutched it like treasure. Jace cleared his throat roughly. Doc, you able to examine her now? Make sure she's okay? Of course. Sheriff, we'll need to make formal statements, but not today. Today she needs... He stopped, unsure what she needed. Food, water, sleep, a life that didn't include being hunted. Today I need my family, Mara said softly. Even if it's just for a few hours. Even if you send me away tomorrow. Please, Jace, just let me see him. Let me be here. Jace looked at Theo, who was examining the lock of hair with intense fascination. You think she's really your mama? He asked the boy quietly. Theo looked up at Mara, then back at Jace, then at Mara again. She knows my name, he said seriously, and she likes horses, and she has my hair. He paused. And she has the same eyes as me. Daddy, look, we have the same eyes. And they did. That particular shade of deep gray blue, like storm clouds over the mountains. Jace felt something in his chest crack, just a little crack, but enough to let in the smallest sliver of light. 1 week, he heard himself say. Mara's breath caught. What? 1 week, you come back to the ranch. You sleep in the guest room. You spend time with Theo, supervised. And at the end of that week, he met her eyes. At the end of that week, we decide what happens next. If you run again, I won't. If you run, he continued grimly, I'm done. He's done. You'll be dead to us for real this time. Understood? Understood. She was crying again, but different now. These were tears of relief. Thank you, Jace, thank you. Don't thank me. He stood, settling Theo more firmly on his hip. And don't think this means I forgive you. I don't. I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But that boy... His voice roughened. That boy deserves to know his mother, if that's really who you are. It is. I swear it is. He nodded once, sharp, then to the room at large. We're going home. Doc, can you... I'll come by tomorrow, Doc Harrison said gently. Make sure Mrs. Holloway gets proper medical attention. Thank you. At the door, Jace paused. You'll need clothes, real clothes. I kept your things, he said abruptly. Your trunk, from before. It's in the attic. Couldn't bring myself to burn it or give it away. He didn't look at her. Figured Theo might want it someday, to remember you by. Mara pressed a hand to her mouth. Come on, Jace said gruffly. Wagon's outside. It's an hour ride to the ranch. The ride home. The wagon rattled north out of Red Valley, following the dirt road that wound through winter-brown grassland toward the mountains. Jace drove. Theo sat between them, clutching his lock of hair and chattering about horses with the unstoppable enthusiasm of a 4-year-old who'd decided this strange woman was acceptable. Mara sat on the far side of the bench, her hands folded in her lap, the wedding dress already starting to stiffen with cold. It's beautiful, she said after a long silence. I forgot how beautiful it was. Jace didn't ask what she meant. He knew. The valley in autumn, dressed in gold and copper, the mountains rising like cathedral walls, the sky so blue it hurt. You remember the ranch? He asked. Every inch, every fence post, every window. She glanced at him. How much has changed? Doubled the herd, built a new barn last spring. Old one finally gave up in a windstorm. Added on a room to the house. He didn't say for Theo, but because I couldn't bear to raise him in the same room where I woke up and you were gone. Tell me about him, Mara said softly. Tell me everything. So he did. He told her about Theo's first word, horse, naturally. His first steps, taken while trying to chase the barn cat. The way he laughed like a steam whistle when you tossed him in the air. His absolute refusal to eat carrots, but his willingness to consume his body weight in biscuits. His fascination with thunder. His terror of spiders. The way he talked to the horses like they understood every word. And maybe they did. He's smart, Jace said. Too smart sometimes. Got your brain. And your stubbornness. Yeah, that too. Theo, wedged between them, had fallen asleep with his head on Mara's lap. She looked down at him with such naked love that Jace had to look away. I missed all of it, she whispered. His first word, his first steps, every single day. I know. I would have given anything. I know, Mara. They rode in silence for a while. What happens if they come after me? She asked finally. Dorian, my father. They won't just let me go. Then they'll have to go through me. Jace's voice was flat. And half this valley. Nobody messes with Red Valley folk. That's just how it is out here. You'd do that? After everything? He was quiet for a long time. You're Theo's mother, he said finally. That matters. Maybe that's all that matters right now. The ranch. The house came into view as the sun touched the western peaks. A sturdy two-story building with a wraparound porch, corrals to one side, barn to the other, and mountains beyond like a promise of forever. Mara made a sound, half sob, half laugh. You painted it! Seemed like time. The house had been bare wood when she left. Now it was white with green shutters. Theo picked the color. He has good taste. Jace pulled the wagon to a stop by the porch. Theo woke up with a start, looked around, and scrambled down with the fearlessness of youth. Come meet the horses, come on. Theo, it's nearly dark. Just for a minute, please, Jace sighed. 10 minutes, then inside for supper. They walked to the corral, where 7 horses stood in the gathering dusk. Theo climbed the fence like a monkey and started introducing them one by one. That's Copper. He's old but nice. And that's Betty. She's mine even though Daddy says I'm too young to ride alone. And that's... Mara wasn't listening. She was staring at a gray mare in the corner. Storm, she breathed. The mare lifted her head and then, incredibly, walked over to the fence. Mara reached out a shaking hand and Storm pressed her nose into her palm. You kept her. Couldn't sell her, Jace said gruffly. She wouldn't eat for 3 weeks after you left. Kept looking for you. Figured if I sold her, it'd be... He trailed off. Admitting I wasn't coming back? Something like that. Mara pressed her face against Storm's neck and wept, the first real crying she'd allowed herself. Storm stood still, patient, like she understood. Theo watched with wide eyes. Why is she crying, Daddy? Because she's home, bud. Inside, the house was exactly as Mara remembered, and completely different. The same furniture, the same stone fireplace, the same view from the kitchen window. But there were new things too. Theo's drawings covering one wall, boots of 2 sizes by the door, a child's coat hung low enough for small hands to reach. A life built without her. Guest room's upstairs, Jace said, not meeting her eyes. First door on the left. I'll bring up your trunk. And something for supper. Jace? 1 week, Mara. That's what we agreed. Don't push it tonight. She nodded. Okay. Theo grabbed her hands. I'll show you. Come on. The room was small but clean. A bed, a dresser, a window looking out over the valley. Mara's old trunk sat at the foot of the bed. Daddy comes in here sometimes, Theo confided. When he thinks I'm sleeping, he just sits and looks at your stuff. Theo, Jace's voice from the doorway was warning. What? You do? Go wash up for supper. But now. Theo sighed dramatically and ran out. Jace set a plate on the dresser. Bread, cheese, some kind of stew. Doc said you probably need to eat slow, don't want to make yourself sick. Thank you. He nodded, started to leave. Jace? He stopped but didn't turn around. I know you don't believe me yet. I know you can't. But I'm going to prove it to you. Every single day of this week, I'm going to show you that I came back because I love you. Both of you. More than anything. His shoulders tensed. Don't make promises you can't keep. I'm not. He left without another word. Mara sat on the bed, picked up the plate with trembling hands, and took a small bite of bread. It tasted like hope. It tasted like home. That night, Mara woke screaming. She was back in the sanatorium, back in the locked room, back with Dorian's hands around her throat and his voice in her ear telling her she'd never escape, never leave, never. Mara? Arms around her, strong, familiar arms. She fought them, panicked, still half in the nightmare. Mara, it's me. It's Jace. You're safe. You're in Red Valley. You're safe. The words penetrated slowly. She stopped fighting, looked up. Jace knelt beside the bed, his hair wild from sleep, wearing just an undershirt and trousers, his hands on her shoulders. You're okay, he said again, quieter. You're okay. She was gasping like she'd run a mile. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... Don't apologize for nightmares. Behind him, in the doorway, Theo stood clutching a stuffed rabbit and looking terrified. Is she okay? His voice was so small. She's okay, bud. Just a bad dream. I get bad dreams sometimes, Theo offered. Daddy says I should think about horses until I fall asleep again. Mara managed a watery laugh. That's good advice. Do you want my rabbit? He helps. The offer, made with such earnest generosity, broke something in her. I would love your rabbit, she whispered. Theo patted over and carefully placed the well-loved toy in her arms. His name is Mr. Flop, because his ears flop. Hello, Mr. Flop. Come on, Theo. Jay scooped up his son. Back to bed. But she'll be fine, I promise. After they left, Mara sat in the dark, clutching a toy rabbit that smelled like lavender and little boy, and cried again. But different this time. These were tears of gratitude, because for the first time in 4 years, when she woke up screaming, someone came. Someone cared. Someone said, "You're safe." Outside the window, the mountain stood black against the stars, and somewhere in the house, Jace Holloway sat awake in his own room, wondering if he was making the biggest mistake of his life or the most right thing he'd ever done. Only time would tell. And Mara Kent Holloway had 1 week to prove which it was. Dawn came cold and clear, painting the valley in shades of rose gold that made everything look possible. Mara woke to the sound of roosters and the low murmur of voices downstairs. For one disoriented moment, she thought she was 21 again, newly married, waking up in the home she and Jace had built together. Then reality settled back in, heavier than the quilt covering her, sharper than the morning air seeping through the window frame. She was 25 now. 4 years had been stolen, and she had 6 days left to prove she deserved to stay. She dressed in clothes from her old trunk, a simple brown skirt and cream blouse that hung looser than they once had. Her hands shook as she buttoned the blouse. The fabric smelled like cedar and thyme, like a life she'd been forced to leave behind. When she finally worked up the courage to look in the small mirror above the dresser, a stranger stared back. Same gray-blue eyes, same dark hair, but everything else had been carved away by hardship until only the essential remained. Downstairs, she found Jace at the stove, flipping pancakes with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd been doing it alone for too long. Theo sat at the table, swinging his legs and conducting an elaborate conversation with Mr. Flop about the relative merits of syrup versus honey. Mr. Flop says syrup, Theo announced, but I think he's wrong. Mr. Flop's a rabbit, Jace said without turning around. What does he know about breakfast? He knows a lot. He's very smart. Mara stood in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. This was their routine, their rhythm, built over years she hadn't been part of. She was the intruder here, the ghost trying to reclaim a place among the living. Theo saw her first. You're awake. Did Mr. Flop help? He helped very much. She stepped into the kitchen, careful to keep her distance from Jace. Thank you for lending him to me. You can keep him if you have more bad dreams. Daddy says everybody gets bad dreams sometimes, and that's okay. Your daddy's right. Jace finally turned, spatula in hand. His eyes swept over her, quick, clinical, looking for signs of what she didn't know. Weakness? Deception? The woman she used to be? Coffee's on the table, he said. Breakfast in 5 minutes. Can I help? You can sit down. You're still recovering. It wasn't an offer. It was an order, delivered in that flat tone he'd been using since yesterday, the tone of a man who'd built walls so high even he couldn't see over them anymore. Mara sat. Breakfast was pancakes, eggs, and a silence broken only by Theo's chatter. The boy had apparently decided she was acceptable, and now treated her with the easy trust of childhood, asking questions between bites about whether she liked dogs better than cats, and if she could braid hair, and had she ever seen a bear. I saw a bear once, she said, years ago. It was eating berries by the creek. Were you scared? Terrified. What did you do? Stood very still. Your daddy taught me that. If you see a bear, don't run. Just wait for it to leave. Theo turned to Jace with accusing eyes. You never told me you taught her about bears. Didn't seem important, Jace muttered. But Mara saw the way his jaw tightened, the way his knuckles went white around his coffee cup. Every mention of their past was a wound reopened, and she was forcing him to bleed in front of his son. After breakfast, Jace stood and started clearing plates. I've got work to do. Fence line in the north pasture needs mending. Theo, you're staying here. But I always help with fences. Not today. That's not fair. Life isn't fair. Jace's voice had an edge now. You're staying here with Mara. If she needs anything, if there's any trouble, you come get me. Understand? The implication hung in the air like smoke. I don't trust her alone. I don't trust her not to run. I don't trust her with you. Theo, oblivious to the undercurrent, just grinned. We're going to have so much fun. I can show her the chickens and the barn and show her whatever you want, but you stay where I can see the house. Clear? Clear. Jace finally looked at Mara. You need anything before I go? Just a chance, she said quietly. Something flickered in his eyes, pain maybe, or anger, or some combination the two had merged into after years of grief. You've got 6 more days. Use them well. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with careful control, and Mara was left alone with a 4-year-old boy who was her son, but also a stranger, in a house that was her home, but also a museum of the life she'd lost. Theo hopped down from his chair. Come on, chickens first. The morning passed in a blur of small revelations. Theo showed her everything with the pride of ownership. The chicken coop where the hens pecked and muttered, the garden plot Jace had enclosed with wire fencing, the old oak tree where a rope swing hung motionless in the cold air. He talked continuously, an endless stream of observations and questions and stories, and Mara drank it in like someone dying of thirst. That's where I fell and split my lip, Theo said, pointing to the porch steps. Had to get 3 stitches. Daddy said I was braver than soldiers. I bet you were. That's where Biscuit sleeps when it rains. The barn, warm and dim and smelling of hay. And that's where we keep the kittens, but they're not babies anymore. Daddy says they're cats now, but I still call them kittens because they act like babies. 3 half-grown cats wound around her ankles, purring. Mara crouched down and let them investigate her hands, her skirt, her hair. They like you, Theo observed. Animals always know if people are good or bad. Daddy told me that. Your daddy tells you a lot of things. He's smart. He knows everything. Theo paused, his face scrunching in thought. Well, almost everything. He didn't know you were alive. The words landed like stones. No, Mara said carefully. He didn't. Nobody did. Were you hiding? In a way. From bad people? She looked at this small, serious boy, her son, God, her son, and decided he deserved as much truth as she could give him. Yes, from very bad people who didn't want me to leave, but I left anyway because I had to come back to you. Theo considered this with the gravity of a judge. That was brave. Thank you. Braver than soldiers. I don't know about that. I think it was. He slipped his hand into hers, small and warm and trusting. I'm glad you came back. Mara's throat closed. She squeezed his hand gently. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. They walked back to the house, hand in hand, while November wind rattled the bare branches overhead. In the north pasture, barely visible against the brown grass, Jace worked the fence line with mechanical precision. Mara watched him move, the familiar way he swung the hammer, the set of his shoulders, the occasional pause to wipe sweat despite the cold, and felt something crack apart inside her chest. She'd loved this man, still loved him, if she was honest. But love wasn't enough anymore. Love hadn't kept her safe. Love hadn't prevented her father from selling her like property. Love was just the foundation, and foundations could be built on or abandoned, and she didn't know which he'd choose. Inside, Theo demanded lunch. Mara found bread, cheese, and the remains of yesterday's stew. They ate at the kitchen table while Theo told her an elaborate story about a horse named Copper, who was secretly a wizard. It was nonsense, delightful nonsense, and Mara laughed for the first time in 4 years. Really laughed, until tears streamed down her face. You have a funny laugh, Theo announced. Like bells. Is that good or bad? Good. Daddy never laughs like that. The observation cut deeper than he knew. After lunch, Mara washed dishes while Theo drew pictures at the table. She'd just finished drying the last plate when she heard hoofbeats outside. Not Jace's steady rhythm, but something faster, more urgent. She moved to the window. A rider was coming up the lane at full gallop, trailing dust. Theo pressed against her side. That's Mr. Brennan. Something's wrong. The boy was right. Tom Brennan pulled his horse to a sliding stop and practically fell out of the saddle, already shouting, Jace, Jace, we've got trouble. In the north pasture, Jace was already running. Mara's blood went cold. She grabbed Theo's shoulder. Stay here. Lock the door after me. Don't open it unless it's me or your father, understand? But stay here. She ran outside. Jace and Tom were converging by the barn, both men's faces grim. What happened? Jace demanded. Sheriff just got a telegram from Denver. Some fancy lawyer claiming his client has legal claim to a woman matching Mara's description. Says she's mentally unfit, that she escaped lawful custody, that Tom stopped when he saw Mara. Ma'am, you better hear this too. I'm listening. Says she's dangerous to herself and others. Says her lawful husband has the right to retrieve her. And he's on his way here. Right now. The words hit like physical blows. Mara felt the ground tilt, felt 4 years of running collapse into this single moment. Dorian, she whispered. He found me. Jace's face had gone hard as granite. When? Telegram came through an hour ago. Sheriff thinks they might arrive as early as tomorrow. Could be a whole party of them. Lawyer, hired guns, maybe even a federal marshal if they've got the paperwork in order. Let them come. Jace's voice was flat, lethal. This is my land. She's under my protection. Jace, if they've got legal documents, I don't care if they've got a note from God himself. She's not going anywhere. Tom glanced at Mara. Ma'am, is it true? Are you married to this Crane fellow? Not willingly. They forced me, forged my signature on documents I never signed, locked me up when I fought back. Her voice shook but held. I'm not going back. I'll die first. Nobody's dying, Jace said sharply. Tom, ride back to town. Tell the sheriff what's happening. Tell him to round up anyone who's willing to stand witness. If these bastards want to take her, they'll have to do it in front of half the valley. That might not be enough if they've got federal law on their side. Then we'll make it enough. Go. Tom nodded once and wheeled his horse around, already spurring back toward town. Jace turned to Mara. His eyes were blazing. Inside. Now. We need to talk. In the kitchen, Theo sat exactly where she'd left him, clutching Mr. Flop. What's happening? Grown-up things, bud. Jace's voice gentled fractionally. Why don't you go upstairs and play? We'll call you when... No. Theo's small voice was fierce. She's my mama. If bad people are coming, I want to know. Jace opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Mara. Tell him, she said quietly. He deserves to know. So Jace did. in simple terms a child could grasp. Bad men were coming to try to take Mara away. They claimed they had the right, but Jace was going to stop them. Theo listened with wide eyes. When Jace finished, the boy stood up very straight. They can't have her. She just got here. I know, bud. We won't let them, right? Right. Promise? Jace looked at his son, then at Mara, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes, between caution and commitment, between protecting his heart and protecting his family. I promise, he said finally. Theo nodded, satisfied, and went back to his drawing. Jace gestured for Mara to follow him into the front room, out of earshot. When they were alone, he turned on her. I need the truth. All of it. Right now. What kind of men are we dealing with? Dorian Crane is... She stopped, started again. He's rich, connected. He owns half the steel mills in Pittsburgh and has senators in his pocket. When I tried to leave the first time, he had me declared mentally incompetent, locked me in a private sanatorium for 18 months. Jace's face went white. A sanatorium. They called it treatment. It was torture. Cold baths, restraints, drugs that made me forget my own name. Her voice was shaking now, but she forced the words out. When that didn't break me, he moved me to his estate. Guards at every door. My father visited once, told me I'd brought it on myself. That if I'd just been obedient, none of this would have happened. Jesus Christ. I escaped 3 times. The first 2 times they caught me within hours. The third time, she swallowed hard. The third time was last week. There was a wedding, Dorian's business partner's daughter. Big event, lots of guests, everyone distracted. I slipped away during the reception, stole a horse, rode until it collapsed, then walked, sold my wedding ring for train fare. And here I am. Here you are, Jace repeated. He ran both hands through his hair, a gesture she remembered from years ago when he was trying to think through an impossible problem. They'll have documentation, marriage certificates, medical records, testimony from doctors he paid off. In the eyes of the law, you're probably still his wife, still his property. I know. So what do you want me to do? The question caught her off guard. What? I'm asking what you want, because if you want to fight this, we fight. But if you think running might be safer, I'm not running anymore. Her voice cracked. I can't, I won't. If I run now, I'll be running forever. And Theo... She stopped, regaining control. Theo deserves a mother who stands and fights, even if I lose. Jay studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, something settling in his expression. All right, then we fight. But you do exactly what I say when I say it. If I tell you to hide, you hide. If I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. Good. Now here's what we're going to do. He laid it out quickly, efficiently. Fortify the house, make sure the rifles were loaded, position trusted neighbors at strategic points. When Dorian Crane and his hired guns arrived, they'd find a united front, not just one man defending his family, but an entire community refusing to let outsiders take one of their own. They'll probably come tomorrow, Jace said. Mid-morning, when they think we'll be unprepared. We'll make sure we're not. Jace, Mara's voice was soft. Why are you doing this? Yesterday you could barely look at me. Today you're preparing to go to war for me. He was quiet for a beat too long. You're Theo's mother. That's reason enough. Is it? It has to be. He met her eyes. Don't ask for more than that right now. I can't give it. I'm not asking for... Yes, you are. His voice was rough. Every time you look at me, you're asking if I still love you, if I can forgive you, if we can go back to what we were. And I don't have answers, Mara. All I know is that boy in there deserves his mother, and I'm not letting anyone take you away again, not while I'm breathing. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was something, a foundation they could maybe build on if they survived what was coming. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded once, then went to check the rifles. That night, the house filled with people. Tom Brennan returned with Sheriff Pritchard and Doc Harrison. Then came the Hendersons, the Cassidys, Old Vernon Cross, and a dozen others, ranchers and shopkeepers and farmers who'd known Mara before, who remembered her kindness, who believed in protecting their own. They crowded into the kitchen and front room, drinking coffee, speaking in low voices, organizing watches and signals. Martha Yates had brought her husband's old buffalo rifle. "Any man tries to take you, honey, he's got to go through me first." "I appreciate that, Martha. You're one of us, always were. Don't matter what papers some city lawyer waves around." Eleanor Henderson squeezed Mara's hand. "I lost my sister to a bad marriage back east. Never got her back. I'll be damned if I let it happen again." One by one, they pledged their support. Some because they believed in justice. Some because they hated government overreach. Some simply because Jace Holloway was their neighbor, and when trouble came to a neighbor's door, you stood with them. Theo watched it all with solemn eyes, sitting on Mara's lap because he'd refused to go to bed. Finally, Jace came over and lifted him up. "Time for sleep, bud." "But I want to help." "You help by staying safe." Jace's voice was gentle but firm. "That's the most important job of all." He carried the boy upstairs. Mara heard their voices through the ceiling, Theo arguing, Jace reasoning, then the creak of bed springs and the low murmur of a lullaby. The same lullaby she used to sing, about horses running free and mountains standing tall. When Jace came back down, his eyes found hers across the crowded room. "He's out," he said. "Finally." "You're good with him." "Had to be. Didn't have much choice." The words stung, as he'd probably intended them to. But Mara didn't flinch. By midnight, everyone had left except Tom and Sheriff Pritchard, who'd volunteered to take first watch. Jace walked Mara upstairs carrying a rifle. "You know how to use this?" "You taught me, remember?" "I remember." He set it against the wall by her bed. "Someone will be outside your door all night. If anything happens, you scream. Don't hesitate, don't try to be brave, just scream." "All right." He turned to go. "Jace?" "Yeah?" "What you said earlier, about not having answers." She drew a breath. "I don't need you to love me. I don't even need you to forgive me. I just need you to believe that I'm telling the truth, that I was taken, that I fought, that I came back because I had to, not because I wanted something from you." He looked at her for a long time, his face shadowed in the dim light. "I believe you," he said finally. "Doesn't make it hurt less. But I believe you." Then he was gone, and Mara was alone with her thoughts and a loaded rifle and the terrible certainty that tomorrow would decide everything. She didn't sleep. How could she? Every creak of the house was a footstep. Every gust of wind was a warning. She sat by the window watching the moon track across the sky and thought about all the moments that had led to this one. Her father's ambition, Dorian's cruelty, her own desperate choices. But also, Theo's laugh, Storm's velvet nose in her palm, the way Jace's voice had softened when he said, "I believe you." If tomorrow ended in capture and being dragged back to Pittsburgh and locked away forever, at least she'd had this. These 3 days of being home. Dawn came slowly, staining the sky pink and gold. Mara heard movement downstairs, coffee brewing, low voices, the click of rifle bolts being checked. She dressed carefully in the warmest clothes she had, braided her hair tight, and went down to face whatever came next. Jace was at the kitchen table cleaning his rifle with methodical precision. He looked up when she entered. "You didn't sleep." "Neither did you." "No." He set the rifle aside. "They'll be here soon. You should eat something." She couldn't imagine eating, but she forced down bread and coffee while Theo slept upstairs, mercifully oblivious. Outside, neighbors were already arriving, positioning themselves around the property, checking sight lines, settling in for what might be a long wait. At 10 o'clock, a rider appeared on the eastern road. Then another, and another. Sheriff Pritchard lowered his spyglass. 6 men, 2 wagons. One of them looks official, could be a federal marshal. "Let them come," Jace said. Mara stood beside him on the porch, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. This was it. 4 years of running ended here on this porch where she'd once been happy. The riders approached slowly, deliberately. When they were close enough to see clearly, Mara's breath caught. The lead rider was Dorian Crane himself. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall, silver-haired, expensively dressed, with the kind of face that would be handsome if it weren't so cold. His eyes swept the property, taking in the armed neighbors, the defensive positions, the clear message of resistance. Then he saw her. His smile was terrible. "Hello, darling. I've missed you." Jace stepped in front of her. "That's close enough." Dorian's group stopped 20 feet from the porch. Behind him, a thin man in a black suit clutched a leather folder. The lawyer. Next to him, a man with a federal marshal's badge. And behind them, 4 hired guns who looked like they'd happily start shooting if given the word. The lawyer cleared his throat. "I am Arthur Pemberton, representing Mr. Dorian Crane of Pittsburgh. We're here to retrieve Mrs. Mara Crane, who is currently—" "Her name is Holloway," Jace interrupted, "and she's not going anywhere." "Mr. Holloway, I presume." Pemberton's voice was oily. "I'm afraid you're harboring a woman who legally belongs to— nobody belongs to anyone. Perhaps not in the moral sense, but in the eyes of the law, Mrs. Crane is the wife of my client. She was declared mentally incompetent by 3 separate physicians and placed under her husband's care. Her escape from that care was unlawful. Her presence here is unlawful. And if you continue to harbor her, you yourself will be breaking federal law." The marshal spoke up, his voice weary. "I don't like this any more than you do, folks, but I've got court orders. If she's who they say she is, I have to enforce them." Mara stepped out from behind Jace. "My name is Mara Kent Holloway. I was born in Red Valley. I married Jace Holloway 5 years ago in the church in town. I never agreed to marry Dorian Crane. I was kidnapped, coerced, and imprisoned." Dorian's smile widened. "Darling, your illness makes you believe these things, but I'm not ill, I'm not incompetent, and I'm not your wife. The law says otherwise." He gestured to Pemberton, who opened his folder and began reading. Marriage certificates, medical evaluations, testimonies from doctors she'd never met, claiming she was unstable, dangerous, prone to delusions. With each word, Mara felt the trap closing. These were official documents, stamped and sealed. In the eyes of the law, she was exactly what they claimed, a madwoman who needed to be returned to her keeper. But then Sheriff Pritchard stepped forward. "That's all very impressive, Mr. Pemberton, but I've got some documents of my own." He pulled out a folder. "This is Mara Holloway's marriage certificate to Jace Holloway, filed with the county in 1880. This is the birth certificate for Theo Holloway, listing her as mother, and this—" He pulled out another paper. "This is a statement signed by 12 citizens of Red Valley testifying to her sound mind and good character." Pemberton barely glanced at them. "Those documents predate my client's marriage to Mrs. Crane. They're therefore irrelevant." "How convenient," Doc Harrison called from his position by the barn, "that your marriage happened to take place right after she mysteriously disappeared from our town. Mysterious to you, perhaps, but the timeline is clear. After leaving Red Valley of her own accord—" "She didn't leave!" The shout came from Tom Brennan. "She was taken, and anyone with eyes can see it." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled neighbors. The marshal held up his hands. "Folks, I understand your feelings, but feelings don't trump legal documents. I've got court orders signed by a federal judge. Now, we can do this easy, or we can do this hard. Mrs. Crane, will you come with us willingly?" "No," Mara said, "I won't. Then I'm afraid I'll have to—" "Marshal," Jace's voice cut like a blade, "you take one step closer to her, and we've got a problem. Mr. Holloway, I don't want trouble." "Neither do I. But that woman is under my protection. She's the mother of my child. And she's staying here. Even if it means breaking federal law, even then." The marshal sighed. "Mr. Holloway, I've got 4 deputies with me. You've got, what, a dozen neighbors with hunting rifles? This won't end well for anyone." "Maybe not." Jace's hand rested on his holstered revolver. "But it'll end worse for you than for us. That's a promise." The tension stretched like wire about to snap. Mara saw Dorian's hired guns shifting in their saddles, hands moving toward weapons, saw the neighbors taking aim, saw the marshal calculating odds and not liking the answer. Then a small voice broke the silence. "Don't take my mama away!" Everyone turned. Theo stood in the doorway in his nightshirt, his face streaked with tears, holding Mr. Flop. "Theo, get inside," Jace ordered. "No, they can't have her. She just came home. The boy ran down the porch steps before anyone could stop him and threw his arms around Mara's legs. Please don't go, he sobbed. Please, Mama, please. Mara's heart shattered. She sank to her knees and pulled him close. I'm not going anywhere, baby. I promise. Dorian's face twisted. How touching. But the boy's attachment doesn't change the law. Maybe not, Doc Harrison said quietly. But it sure as hell shows who his real mother is. The marshal was watching Theo with troubled eyes. Whatever he'd expected, it wasn't this, a terrified child clinging to a woman who was supposed to be insane. Mr. Crane, he said slowly, I'm starting to think there's more to this story than your lawyer's telling me. Marshal, I have federal court orders. I can read, but I'm also not blind. He looked at Mara. Ma'am, did you willingly marry this man? No, I was forced at gunpoint. She's delusional, Pemberton interjected. The medical records clearly show... I'd like to hear from the lady herself. The marshal's voice had an edge now. Ma'am, do you have proof of your claims? I have this. Mara pulled out the oilcloth bundle. Letters between my father and Dorian Crane arranging my sale. Medical records from the sanatorium where I was held against my will, and my own testimony. None of which is admissible, Pemberton said quickly. She's been declared incompetent. Her testimony is worthless. By doctors in Pittsburgh, Sheriff Pritchard pointed out. Doctors who work for Mr. Crane. Are you suggesting... Oh, I'm suggesting this whole thing stinks to high heaven. The marshal took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair. Look, I came here expecting to retrieve a mad woman. What I'm finding is a whole town vouching for her sanity and a very convenient set of legal documents that appeared right after she disappeared. Mr. Crane, you'll forgive me if I'm skeptical. Dorian's voice went cold. Marshal, you have your orders. I do, but I also have discretion. And right now, my discretion tells me something's not right here. He looked at Mara again. Ma'am, will you consent to being examined by an independent physician? Someone not connected to either party? Of course. Then here's what's going to happen. You stay here while I wire for a federal judge to review this case. We get an independent medical evaluation. We hear testimony from both sides in a proper court. And then, and only then, we decide where you belong. That's unacceptable, Dorian snapped. I have legal custody, which I'm temporarily suspending pending further investigation. The marshal's voice was iron now. Mr. Crane, you can argue with me all you want, but those are my terms. Take them or leave them. Dorian's face flushed red. For a moment, Mara thought he might order his men to start shooting, but then he looked around at the armed neighbors, at the determined faces, at the mother and child clinging to each other, and apparently decided discretion was the better part of valor. This isn't over, he said quietly. Mara, darling, I'll see you soon. Over my dead body, Jay said. Dorian's smile was a knife. That can be arranged. Then he wheeled his horse around and rode back toward town, his entourage following. The marshal stayed behind. Folks, he said tiredly, I meant what I said. This goes through proper channels now, but for what it's worth... He looked at Mara. I believe you. My wife's sister went through something similar. Different circumstances, but same result. So you fight this, you hear me? You fight like hell. I will, Mara whispered. After the marshal left, the yard erupted in cheers and backslapping and relief. But Mara just held Theo and shook, because she knew, they all knew, this was just the beginning. The real battle was still to come. The fever came 3 days later, creeping into Red Valley like a thief in the night. Doc Harrison had warned them it was making its rounds through the mining camps up north. Some kind of influenza, vicious and fast-moving, hitting children and the elderly hardest. By the time it reached town, half the families were already keeping their doors locked and their windows shut, burning sage and praying it would pass them by. It didn't. Jace had spent those 3 days riding between the ranch and town, meeting with lawyers, filing counter-petitions, building a legal defense that felt more like constructing a dam with twigs while a flood rushed toward them. The marshal had been true to his word. A federal judge was coming from Helena to review the case, expected within the week. But in the meantime, Dorian Crane hadn't left Red Valley. He'd taken rooms at the hotel, his lawyer and hired guns in tow, making it clear he wasn't going anywhere without his prize. Mara had spent those same days learning to be a mother to a child who didn't quite remember her. Theo was warming to her, bringing her rocks he found interesting, asking her to read him stories, falling asleep against her shoulder after supper. But there was still a carefulness between them, like two dancers learning steps they should have known by heart. She helped with chores, mucked stalls until her hands blistered, cooked meals that Jace ate in silence, and tried not to think about what would happen if the judge ruled against her. On the third night, Eleanor Henderson's youngest came down with the fever. By morning, 3 more children in town were burning up, including the blacksmith's twin boys. Doc Harrison moved from house to house with his medical bag, dispensing what remedies he had and hoping for the best. "Keep them cool," he told worried mothers. "Lots of water, and pray. That's about all we can do." Jace heard about it when he rode into town that morning to meet with Sheriff Pritchard. He came back to the ranch with his face drawn tight. "Doc needs help," he told Mara. "Half the town's getting sick, and he can't be everywhere at once. I'm going back." "You should stay here," Mara said, "with Theo. Doc needs hands, people who aren't afraid to get close to the sick." "Then let me go." Jace looked at her sharply. "You? I've nursed people through fever before. My mother taught me when I was young, before she died of one herself. I know what to do." "You've barely been back a week. You're still recovering." "I'm fine. And I'm not asking for permission, Jace. Those people stood up for me when Dorian came. The least I can do is help them now." Something shifted in his expression, not quite trust, but close to it. "All right, but Theo stays here." "Of course. Tom Brennan's wife can watch him. She's keeping her kids home from school anyway. One more won't matter." They rode into town together, the first time they'd been truly alone since her return. The silence between them was heavy, but not hostile, more like 2 people carrying the same weight, trying to figure out how to balance the load. "You really nursed people through fever?" Jace asked finally. "In Pittsburgh. In the sanatorium." Her voice was flat. "When other patients got sick, they'd sometimes put me to work. Figured if I was going to be crazy anyway, might as well be useful." His jaw tightened. "Mara, I don't need your pity, Jace. I just need you to believe that I'm not helpless, that I survived because I learned to be strong." "I never thought you were helpless." "No? Then what did you think?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I thought you were the bravest person I'd ever met. From the moment I met you. You stood up to your father when he said ranchers weren't good enough for the Kent family. You learned to ride like you were born to it. You helped birth calves in the middle of winter and never complained once." He paused. "And when you disappeared, I thought maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe you weren't brave at all. Maybe you'd just been pretending. And now? Now I don't know what to think, except that you're here and you're fighting, and that takes a kind of courage I can't even imagine." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement, and that was something. They spent the day moving from house to house. Doc Harrison directed them like a general deploying troops. Mara to the Hendersons, where little Emma was worst off. Jace to the blacksmiths, where both twins were barely conscious with fever. Mara worked through the afternoon and into the evening, sponging hot foreheads, coaxing water down burning throats, changing sweat-soaked sheets. Eleanor Henderson wept with exhaustion and gratitude. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she sobbed. "You'd manage," Mara said gently. "But you don't have to. I'm here." By the time the sun set, Emma's fever had broken. The child slept peacefully for the first time in 2 days. Her mother collapsed beside her. Mara washed her hands in cold water, rolled her aching shoulders, and went to find Doc Harrison. She found him on the front steps of the general store, his face gray with exhaustion. "How many?" she asked. 12 confirmed cases. 3 more showing symptoms. "The blacksmith's boys aren't improving. I'm worried about them." He rubbed his eyes. "We need more hands, more medicine, more everything. I'll keep helping, as long as you need me." "Even with your own troubles?" Mara smiled tiredly. "Especially because of my own troubles. These people defended me. Now it's my turn. Doc studied her for a moment, then nodded. You're stronger than your father ever gave you credit for. My father never gave me credit for anything except being female and therefore useful for marriage. Well, he was a damn fool. That night, Jace insisted on riding her back to the ranch, even though it was late and he was exhausted. They found Theo asleep at the Brennans, curled up with Mr. Flop and their youngest boy. Jace carried him out to the wagon without waking him. He's been asking for you, Tom Brennan's wife said quietly. Both of you. Wanted to know when his parents were coming home. The word parents, plural, united, hit Mara like a physical blow. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and climbed into the wagon. Theo woke briefly when Jace carried him inside, mumbling something about horses and honey before falling back asleep. Mara tucked him in, brushing hair off his forehead with a tenderness that made her chest ache. He's warm, she said. Jace was beside her in an instant, his own hand on Theo's forehead. Not fever warm, just warm from sleep. You sure? I'm sure. But his hand lingered, protective. Get some sleep, Mara. We'll need to go back tomorrow. She did sleep, deeply and dreamlessly, until the sound of retching woke her in the dead hours before dawn. She was out of bed and down the hall before she was fully conscious. Theo's door was open. Inside, Jace knelt beside the bed while Theo vomited into a basin, his small body shaking. It's okay, bud, Jace murmured. Get it out. That's it. Mara's blood turned to ice water. How long? Started about 20 minutes ago. Jace's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the fear underneath. Fever spiked fast. He was fine when I checked him at midnight. She pressed her hand to Theo's forehead and felt the heat radiating off him like a stove. The boy whimpered and tried to curl into himself. Hurts, he mumbled. Everything hurts. I know, baby. Mara's mind was already racing through everything her mother had taught her, everything she'd learned in Pittsburgh. Jace, get me cold water, as much as you can, and clean cloths. He didn't question, just moved. Mara stripped Theo down to his underthings and began sponging his burning skin with water from the wash basin. The boy cried out at the cold. I know it's awful, sweetheart, but we have to get your fever down. I want it to stop, Theo sobbed. Make it stop, Mama. The word, Mama, said without hesitation, without carefulness, broke something in her. She gathered him close, feeling his fever burning through her nightgown. I'm going to make it stop, I promise. You're going to be fine. Jace returned with a bucket of well water and an armful of cloths. His face was white. Should I ride for Doc? He's already overwhelmed. We can do this ourselves. Mara soaked a cloth and pressed it to Theo's chest. We've dealt with this before. Babies get fevers. They break. He'll be fine. But even as she said it, she felt the terrible heat of him, saw the glassy unfocus in his eyes, and remembered children in the sanatorium who'd burned up from the inside out, while doctors stood helpless. No, she thought fiercely. Not him. Not my son. Not after everything. They worked through the night, taking turns sponging him down, coaxing water past his cracked lips, changing his sheets when sweat soaked through. Theo drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling for his father, sometimes for his mother, sometimes for people who didn't exist. Fevered phantoms conjured by his burning brain. As dawn broke, the fever climbed higher. Theo started shaking violently, his teeth chattering so hard Mara feared he'd bite his tongue. Jace wrapped him in blankets while Mara held his head steady. Jace, this isn't normal fever. This is... I know, his voice cracked. I know. But Doc said to keep them cool and hydrated. We're doing that. What if it's not enough? It has to be enough. He looked at her across their shaking child, and for the first time since she'd returned, the walls were completely gone. It has to be, Mara. I can't lose him. He's all I have. You won't lose him. We won't lose him. She said it like a prayer, like saying it firmly enough could make it true. He's strong. He's a Holloway. He'll fight this. But as morning wore into afternoon, Theo only got worse. The shaking stopped but was replaced by a frightening stillness, his breathing shallow and rapid. His lips turned blue. His eyes, when they opened, didn't recognize them. Mara sang to him. Every lullaby she knew, every song her own mother had sung. She told him stories about brave horses and tall mountains. She promised him everything, more time with Storm, all the honey he could eat, a new rope for the swing. Anything, if he'd just come back to them. Jace paced like a caged animal, checking the window every few minutes as if Doc Harrison might materialize through sheer force of will. I should ride to town. You can't leave him. I can't lose him. You won't. Mara's voice was steel. Sit down, Jace. Your son needs you here. He sat, taking Theo's small hand in his large one. When you were pregnant, he said suddenly, I used to talk to him. Before he was born. Used to tell him about the ranch, about the horses, about how his mother was the strongest person I'd ever met. His voice broke. I told him he was going to be brave like her, strong like her. That between the two of us, he was getting the best parts. Jace, I need you to know that. Even after you disappeared, even when I was angry, I never stopped believing that. I told him stories about you, made sure he knew you hadn't wanted to leave, that somewhere out there his mother loved him. Tears streamed down Mara's face. I did. I do. Every second of every day. I know. I believe you now. He looked at her. And I need you to believe me when I say that we're going to get through this. All three of us. As if in answer, Theo stirred. His eyes fluttered open, clearer than they'd been in hours. Daddy? Jace nearly sobbed. I'm here, bud. I'm cold. That's good. That's really good. Mara pressed her hand to his forehead and nearly wept with relief. Still warm, but not the terrible heat from before. The fever's starting to break. They watched him like hawks as evening approached. The fever climbed and fell in waves, but the peaks were lower each time. Theo drank water without fighting. He recognized them. He even managed a weak smile when Mara produced Mr. Flop from where he'd fallen on the floor. I had bad dreams, he whispered. I know, baby. You were in them, both of you. You were crying. We're not crying now. Jace's voice was rough. You're going to be fine. Promise? Promise. By midnight, the fever broke completely. Theo fell into real sleep, his breathing even, his color returning. Mara and Jace sat on either side of the bed, too exhausted to move, too grateful to sleep. Thank you, Jace said finally. For what? For knowing what to do. For not panicking, for being here. He met her eyes. Couldn't have done this alone. You wouldn't have had to. Even if I wasn't here, Doc would have come, or Eleanor, or... But you were here. You are here. He reached across Theo's sleeping form and took her hand. Mara, I've been angry for so long, hurt for so long. I built walls because that was easier than feeling everything I'd lost. But tonight, his voice broke. Tonight I remembered why I fell in love with you, your strength, your courage, the way you fight for the people you love. Jace, I'm not saying I'm not still hurt. I am. There's things we need to work through, things we need to say. But I'm saying I want to try. For real this time. Not just for Theo, but for us. Mara's tears fell silent and steady. I want that too, more than anything. Then we fight. When that judge comes, when Dorian makes his play, when your father tries to drag you back, we fight together. Together, she echoed. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped across their sleeping son, until exhaustion finally claimed them both. Mara woke slumped in the chair, her hand still in Jace's, gray light creeping through the window. Theo was sitting up in bed, looking confused but healthy. I'm hungry, he announced. Mara laughed, actually laughed, and Jace joined her, the sound rusty but real. Then let's get you fed, Jace said. They made their way downstairs, Jace carrying Theo wrapped in blankets. In the kitchen, Mara started a fire in the stove while Jace settled their son at the table. The simple domesticity of it, the three of them moving around each other, passing plates and pouring milk, felt like a revelation. This was what she'd fought for, this moment, this family. They were halfway through breakfast when hoofbeats sounded outside. All three of them tensed. Jace moved to the window, his hand automatically reaching for the rifle by the door. It's Tom, he said, and he's riding hard. Tom Brennan pulled up in a spray of gravel, practically falling off his horse. Jace met him on the porch. "What is it?" "The judge," Tom panted. "He's here. Arrived early this morning, and Dorian Crane's already got his lawyer in front of him. They're holding a hearing this afternoon at the town hall." He looked at Mara through the doorway. "Ma'am, you need to be there. This is it." Mara felt her stomach drop. "This afternoon? That's not enough time." "It's all the time we've got. Judge Cartwright's a federal circuit judge. He's got 6 other cases to hear in Helena. He's giving this one day, and Crane made sure he got to him first." Jace's face had gone hard. "Then we better not waste it. Mara, go get changed. Theo, you're staying with the Brennans." "But I want to go." "Absolutely not. This is grown-up business. That's not fair. She's my mama." "Which is exactly why you need to stay safe." Jace crouched down to his son's level. "You just got better. I need you to rest, build your strength back up. Can you do that for me?" Theo's face crumpled, but he nodded. "Okay. That's my brave boy." An hour later, Mara stood in the guest room, staring at herself in the mirror. She'd chosen her most respectable dress, navy blue with a modest collar, the kind of thing a rancher's wife would wear to church. She'd braided her hair in a crown around her head, pinned it tight. She looked like the girl Jace had married, before Pittsburgh, before Dorian, before everything had broken. She looked like someone worth fighting for. Downstairs, Jace was waiting in his best shirt and clean trousers. He looked her over once, nodded approval. "Ready?" "No, but let's go anyway." The ride to town was silent, each of them lost in their own thoughts. The valley stretched gold and brown around them, beautiful and indifferent to human drama. Mara tried to memorize it, the curve of the mountains, the distant cattle, the way the light hit the creek, in case this was her last time seeing it free. Red Valley's town hall was packed. It seemed like everyone in the county had turned out, cramming into benches and standing along the walls. Dorian Crane sat at the front with his lawyer and a stack of documents. When Mara entered, his eyes found her and held, possessive and cold. Judge Cartwright was a severe-looking man in his 60s with iron gray hair and no patience for nonsense. He took a seat behind a makeshift bench, actually the town clerk's desk, and banged his gavel. "This hearing will come to order. We're here to determine the status of one Mara Kent Crane, also known as Mara Holloway, and whether she should be remanded to the custody of her legal husband, Dorian Crane, or remain here in Red Valley under the protection of Jace Holloway. Mr. Pemberton, you may begin." The lawyer stood, smoothing his expensive suit. "Thank you, Your Honor. This is a straightforward case. Mrs. Crane, after a period of mental illness, abandoned her lawful home and husband. She is currently in violation of court orders mandating her treatment and care. We ask that she be returned immediately to Pittsburgh, where she can receive proper medical attention." "Mr. Holloway, your response?" Jace stood. "Your Honor, Mara didn't abandon anything. She escaped. There's a difference. A difference that requires proof, Mr. Holloway. Do you have any?" "I've got her testimony. I've got the testimony of everyone in this town who knew her before she was taken. And I've got evidence that her so-called marriage was coerced." "Alleged evidence," Pemberton cut in smoothly, "and the ravings of a woman declared mentally incompetent by 3 separate physicians." "Physicians who worked for Mr. Crane," Sheriff Pritchard called out. "Order!" The judge's gavel cracked. "Everyone will get their turn. Mr. Pemberton, present your evidence." What followed was a parade of documents: the marriage certificate, medical evaluations claiming Mara was unstable and prone to delusions, testimony from servants claiming she was violent and irrational, records of her escapes from the estate. Pemberton painted a picture of a tragic figure, a woman broken by childbirth, unable to cope with motherhood, who'd abandoned her family and descended into madness. "Mr. Crane sought only to help her," Pemberton said smoothly. "He provided the best care available. Private sanatoriums, the finest doctors, every comfort. And how was he repaid? She ran away, time and again, putting herself in danger." "That's a lie!" Mara was on her feet before she could stop herself. "He locked me up. He drugged me. "Mrs. Crane, you'll have your turn to speak," the judge said sternly. "Sit down." Jace pulled her back into her seat, his hand tight on her arm. "Let him finish," he murmured. "Then we go." When Pemberton finally sat down, Looking satisfied, Judge Cartwright turned to Jace. Your turn, Mr. Holloway. Jace stood, and Mara saw the rancher fall away, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. The man who'd built a life from nothing, who'd raised a son alone, who'd faced down hired guns to protect what was his. Your Honor, everything that man just said is a carefully constructed lie. Mara Kent didn't leave Red Valley willingly. She was kidnapped by her father and forced into a marriage she never consented to. I've got letters proving the arrangement between Silas Kent and Dorian Crane. I've got witnesses who saw her the night she disappeared, who heard her father threaten to kill me and our son if she didn't cooperate. I've seen no such letters, Pemberton said, because they're being held by a bank in Denver. Mara hid them before her last escape, knowing she'd need proof. Jace pulled out a telegram. This is confirmation from the bank manager that the documents exist and are being sent here under federal seal. That's convenient, Dorian spoke for the first time, his voice smooth as oil. Documents that haven't arrived yet, from a woman with a demonstrated history of deception. I'm not a liar. Mara stood again, and this time Jace didn't pull her down. You held me prisoner for 4 years. You told everyone I was crazy, so nobody would believe me when I said you were hurting me. You forged my signature on documents I never saw. You kept me locked in rooms without windows, without hope. Your Honor, this outburst demonstrates exactly the kind of instability we're dealing with, Pemberton interjected. No. Judge Cartwright held up a hand. I want to hear this. Mrs. Crane or Mrs. Holloway, whichever you prefer, tell me your story. Start from the beginning. So she did. She told them about waking with a gun to her head, about being dragged from her home, about the forced marriage performed by a judge her father had paid off. She told them about the sanatorium, the drugs, the restraints, the doctors who told her she was sick and just needed to cooperate. She told them about escape attempts that ended in recapture and punishment. And she told them about finally succeeding, about stealing a horse and riding through the night, about selling her wedding ring for train fare and walking the last 50 miles because she had no other choice. By the time she finished, several women in the audience were crying. Even the judge looked troubled. That's quite a story, he said finally. It's the truth. The ravings of a disturbed mind, Pemberton countered. Your Honor, you've heard testimony from medical professionals. I've heard testimony from doctors who were paid by Mr. Crane. I'd like to hear from someone independent. He looked around the room. Is Doc Harrison present? I am, Your Honor. Doc stood from the back. You've examined Mrs. Holloway since her return? I have. And your professional opinion? She's as sane as anyone in this room. Traumatized, certainly. Underfed and exhausted from her ordeal, but mentally sound. If anything, her survival demonstrates remarkable strength of will. Thank you, Doctor. The judge made a note. Mr. Crane, would you care to speak on your own behalf? Dorian rose, smoothing his silver hair. Your Honor, I love my wife. Everything I did was out of concern for her welfare. If my methods seem harsh, it's because her condition required harsh measures. I want only to bring her home, to help her heal. You want to own me, Mara interrupted. That's all you've ever wanted. A beautiful wife to show off, to control, to lock away when I didn't behave. You see? Dorian spread his hands. This paranoia, this hostility, classic symptoms of her condition. Or classic symptoms of a woman who's been abused, Judge Cartwright said dryly. Mr. Crane, I'm troubled by several aspects of your case. The timing of your marriage, the circumstances of Mrs. Holloway's disappearance from Red Valley, the fact that every medical professional who's declared her incompetent works for you. Your Honor, the law is clear. The law is a tool, Mr. Crane, and like any tool, it can be used for good or ill. He looked at Mara. Mrs. Holloway, answer me honestly. If I rule that you must return to Pittsburgh, what will you do? Mara met his eyes. I'll run. I'll keep running until I die, because going back to him is death anyway, just slower and lonelier and more cruel. The room was silent. Then Theo's voice rang out from the back. Apparently the Brennans hadn't been able to keep him away after all. Don't send my mama away, please. She just came home. Every head turned. The small boy stood on a bench, tears streaming down his face. held back only by Tom Brennan's restraining hands. "That's my son," Jace said quietly. 4 years old. Spent the first 4 years of his life without his mother because of what this man did. "If you send her back, Your Honor, you're not just ruling on a marriage dispute, you're destroying a family." Judge Cartwright looked at Theo, at Mara, at Jace, and at Dorian's cold, controlled face. Then he sat back and removed his spectacles, polishing them slowly while the entire town held its breath. "I'm going to make a ruling," he said finally. "But first, I want those documents from Denver. I want an independent medical evaluation, and I want to interview several witnesses privately. This hearing is adjourned until tomorrow morning." The gavel fell, and Mara felt the world tilt. Not a victory, but not defeat either. Another day, another night, another chance. As they filed out of the town hall, Dorian caught her arm. His grip was iron, his voice a whisper meant only for her ears. "You're just delaying the inevitable, darling. One way or another, you're coming back with me, even if I have to burn this entire valley to make it happen." Then Jace was there, his hand on Dorian's wrist, his voice deadly calm. "Touch her again, and you'll lose that hand. That's not a threat. That's a promise." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other, all the violence of the world condensed into that single point of contact. Then Dorian smiled and let go. "Tomorrow, then. I look forward to the judge's decision." He walked away, his lawyer and hired guns falling in behind him, leaving Mara shaking in the afternoon sunlight. "He means it," she whispered. "Jace, he'll burn the valley. He'll kill people. He doesn't care about anything except winning." "Let him try." Jace pulled her close, one arm around her shoulders, the other reaching for Theo, who'd broken free and run to them. "We've got one more day to prove you belong here, and this time we're going to make it count." That night, sleep was impossible. Mara sat by the window in the guest room, watching moonlight paint silver across the valley, while her mind replayed every moment of the hearing. Every word Dorian had spoken, every lie Pemberton had told, every crack in the armor of legality they'd built around her captivity. The documents from Denver were supposed to arrive by morning train, but what if they didn't? What if her father had somehow intercepted them, or destroyed them, or bribed the bank manager? What if tomorrow Judge Cartwright looked at the evidence and decided that 4 years of legal precedent outweighed the truth? Downstairs, she heard Jace moving around, the soft tread of boots on wood, the creak of the front door opening and closing. She pulled a shawl around her shoulders and went down to find him standing on the porch, staring out at the darkness beyond the yard. "Can't sleep either?" she asked quietly. He didn't turn. "Keep thinking about what he said, about burning the valley. He was trying to scare me." "Maybe, or maybe he meant it." Jace's voice was flat. "Men like Crane, they're used to getting what they want. When they don't, they get destructive." Mara moved to stand beside him. The November air bit through her nightgown and shawl, but she didn't care. "I should leave before anyone else gets hurt." "Don't!" The word came out sharp. "Don't even think about running." "But if he's willing to hurt people, then he's already lost." Jace finally looked at her. "You think this valley hasn't faced down threats before? We've dealt with cattle thieves, claim jumpers, drought, fire, and winters that killed half our herds. We survived all of it because we stood together. Dorian Crane is just one more threat, and we'll survive him too. I don't want your survival to cost you everything. It won't, because we're not giving him that power." He reached out and took her hand, the first time he'd initiated contact since the night Theo got sick. "You're one of us, Mara. Whether that judge rules in your favor or not, you're Red Valley, and we protect our own." She squeezed his hand, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. They stood like that for a long moment, two people who'd loved and lost and were slowly, painfully learning to find each other again. "I need to tell you something," Mara said finally. "About Pittsburgh. About Dorian. Things I haven't said because it's hard to talk about. You don't have to." "I do. Because if tomorrow goes wrong, if the judge rules against me, you need to understand what you're fighting for. What I survived." She took a shaking breath. "The sanatorium wasn't just about locking me up. It was about breaking me. They used ice baths that left me shaking for hours. They strapped me to beds and forced drugs down my throat. things that made me forget my own name, made me see things that weren't there. When I fought back, they put me in isolation. Dark rooms, no windows, no sound, days that felt like years. Jace's hand tightened on hers. God, Mara. Dorian would visit sometimes. He'd sit outside the door and talk to me about how this was for my own good, how I just needed to learn to be obedient, to accept my place. Her voice cracked. He told me that you'd already moved on, that you'd remarried, that Theo called another woman mama, that I'd been forgotten. That son of a bitch. I believed him at first. I was so drugged, so confused. I thought maybe it was true. Maybe 4 years was too long. Maybe you'd had to move on. She turned to face him fully. But then one night, I was lucid enough to remember your face when you told me you loved me, the way you looked at me on our wedding day, the sound of your voice when Theo was born and you said he was perfect, and I knew that man wouldn't have just forgotten me. I didn't, Jace said roughly. I couldn't. Even when I was angry, even when I thought you'd left willingly, I couldn't stop. He stopped, struggling with words. You were everywhere. In the house, in the valley, in our son's face. I was furious with you for leaving and desperate to know you were okay. It was hell. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for being kidnapped. Don't you dare. He pulled her close, wrapping both arms around her. I'm the one who should apologize. For not finding you. For believing you were dead. For not looking harder. You had no way to know. I should have known anyway. Should have felt it somehow. That you were out there, suffering, fighting to get back. His voice broke. I should have come for you. Mara pulled back just enough to look at him. You're here now. That's what matters. They stood there in the moonlight, holding each other until the cold drove them inside. Jace built up the fire in the stove while Mara made coffee. Neither of them would drink. Somewhere upstairs, Theo slept peacefully, unaware that tomorrow would decide whether his family survived intact or shattered into pieces again. What do we do if we lose? Mara asked quietly. We don't lose. But if we do, we don't. Jace's voice was iron. I'm not letting them take you. I don't care what some judge says. I don't care if I have to become an outlaw. You're staying here. Jace, if you defy a federal order, then I defy it. What are they going to do? Arrest me? Fine. They can arrest me after you're safe. He met her eyes. I lost you once. I'm not losing you again. Not to him, not to anyone. The fierceness in his voice, the absolute conviction, broke something open in Mara's chest. This was the man she'd married, the one who'd promised to stand by her through everything. She'd thought that man was lost, buried under years of hurt and anger, but he'd been there all along, just waiting for a reason to emerge. I love you, she whispered. I never stopped. Even when they told me you'd moved on, even when I was so drugged I couldn't remember what you looked like. I loved you. It was the only thing they couldn't take away. Jace's face twisted with emotion. Mara, you don't have to say it back. I just need you to know. I do say it back. God help me, I do. He pulled her to him, and this time when he kissed her, it was desperate, fierce, 4 years of loss and longing condensed into a single moment. She kissed him back with everything she had, tasting salt, his tears or hers, she couldn't tell, and feeling like she'd finally come home in every sense that mattered. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Jace rested his forehead against hers. Whatever happens tomorrow, he said, we face it together. No more running, no more hiding. Just us. Just us, she agreed. They stayed up until dawn broke gold across the eastern peaks, talking about everything and nothing, about Theo's first steps and Mara's escape attempts, and what they'd plant in the garden come spring, about the future they wanted to build if they got the chance, about how Theo would need a brother or sister eventually, and how Mara wanted to learn to rope cattle properly, and how Jace had been thinking about adding on another room to the house. They talked like people who'd been given a second chance and were determined not to waste it. When Theo woke, he found them at the kitchen table, hands clasped, watching the sunrise. He climbed into Mara's lap without hesitation. Is today the day? He asked seriously. Yes, sweetheart. Are you scared? A little. Don't be. Daddy says we always win when we fight together. He looked between them. We're together now, right? We're together? Jace confirmed. Then we'll win. Theo said it with such absolute certainty that both adults had to smile. They made breakfast, pancakes and bacon, because Theo insisted that important days required important food. They took their time getting dressed, Mara in her navy dress again, Jace in his Sunday suit, Theo in his best shirt with the collar that made him fidget. They looked like a real family, Mara thought, the kind that belonged together. The ride to town was different from yesterday. No dread, no silence. Instead, Theo chattered about horses and Jace told terrible jokes that made their son laugh, and Mara felt something she hadn't felt in 4 years. Hope. Not the desperate, clawing hope of survival, but the quiet, steady hope of people who believed things might actually work out. Red Valley's main street was even more crowded than yesterday. It seemed the entire county had turned out, plus people from neighboring valleys who'd heard about the case. Martha Yates stood outside the general store with a sign that read, "Justice for Mara." Tom Brennan and a half-dozen other ranchers had positioned themselves around the town hall, armed and watchful. Even the mayor, a usually mild-mannered man named Silas Hutchins, stood on the steps looking grim and determined. "Nobody's taking her," he told Jace as they approached. "Judge rules against us. We'll appeal. File injunctions. Whatever it takes." "Appreciate it, Silas." Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Dorian sat at his table looking confident, his lawyer beside him reviewing notes. But when the federal marshal entered carrying a leather satchel, something shifted in Pemberton's expression, just a flicker of concern, quickly masked. "Documents from the Denver bank," the marshal announced, handing them to Judge Cartwright. "Arrived on the morning train as requested." The judge opened the satchel and began reading. The silence was absolute. Mara watched his face, trying to read every micro-expression, every hint of what he might be thinking. Beside her, Jace sat rigid as stone, his hand finding hers under the table. After what felt like an eternity, Judge Cartwright looked up. "These are letters between Silas Kent and Dorian Crane," he said slowly, "dated September through October 1881. They explicitly discuss an arrangement whereby Miss Kent would be married to Mr. Crane in exchange for forgiveness of gambling debts totaling $47,000. He looked at Dorian. "Mr. Crane, would you care to explain?" "Your Honor, I don't know the provenance of those documents. They're notarized, sealed, bearing both your signature and Kent's." The judge's voice hardened. "Unless you're claiming forgery." Pemberton stood quickly. "Your Honor, even if such an arrangement existed, it doesn't invalidate the marriage itself. Arranged marriages are perfectly legal, when consented to by both parties. These letters suggest Miss Kent was not a willing participant." He pulled out another document. "There's also a medical record here from Dr. Wilhelm Strauss at the Riverside Sanatorium. According to his private notes, which differ substantially from his official reports, Miss Kent showed no signs of mental illness, but was kept sedated at Mr. Crane's request to prevent escape attempts." The room erupted. Pemberton was shouting about illegally obtained evidence. Dorian was on his feet demanding to see the documents, and half the townspeople were calling for Crane's head. Judge Cartwright's gavel cracked like thunder. "Order. I will have order." When silence finally fell, he continued. "I've also reviewed the medical evaluation performed by Dr. Harrison yesterday. His assessment contradicts every report from physicians employed by Mr. Crane. Combined with testimony from Red Valley citizens and the documentary evidence before me, I'm forced to conclude that Mrs. Holloway was indeed coerced into marriage, held against her will, and falsely declared incompetent to facilitate her imprisonment." "Your Honor, this is outrageous," Pemberton started. "What's outrageous, sir, is that you stood in my court yesterday and presented fabricated evidence as truth." The judge's voice could have cut glass. "Mrs. Holloway, please stand." Mara stood on shaking legs. This was it. The moment everything changed. "Based on the evidence presented, I hereby rule that your marriage to Dorian Crane was coerced and is therefore invalid. Further, I'm issuing a restraining order preventing Mr. Crane from approaching you or making any claim to custody or control over your person. You are free to remain in Red Valley with your lawful husband, Jace Holloway, and your son." He banged the gavel. This case is closed. For one heartbeat, the room was silent. Then it exploded into cheers. People were hugging, crying, shouting congratulations. Eleanor Henderson had her arms around Mara before Jace did, sobbing happy tears into her shoulder. Sheriff Pritchard was shaking Jace's hand so hard it looked painful. Theo was being passed from person to person, each one telling him how brave his mama was. Through the chaos, Mara saw Dorian. He stood perfectly still, his face a mask of rage barely contained. When their eyes met, he mouthed two words. "This isn't over." Then he was gone, striding from the hall with Pemberton and his hired guns trailing behind. The marshal watched them go, his hand resting on his revolver. "I'll escort them to the county line," he told Jace. "Make sure they actually leave. But Mr. Holloway," he lowered his voice, "watch your back. Crane's not the type to accept defeat gracefully." "I know. We'll be careful." The celebration spilled out into the street. Someone produced a fiddle, someone else brought out whiskey, and before long it had turned into an impromptu party. Mara found herself at the center of it, accepting congratulations and well wishes from people who barely knew her but had fought for her anyway, because that's what neighbors did. Doc Harrison pulled her aside at one point. "You'll need to file for an official divorce from Crane, even though the marriage was declared invalid, just to make sure there's no legal loopholes he can exploit." "I will, thank you, Doc. For everything." "Don't thank me. Thank your husband. Man didn't sleep for 3 days straight, digging up evidence and calling in every favor he had." He smiled. "He loves you something fierce, you know." "I know." She looked across the crowd to where Jace stood with Theo on his shoulders, both of them laughing at something Tom Brennan had said. "I know." As afternoon wore into evening, people finally began to disperse. Families headed home, ranchers back to their herds, shopkeepers to close up for the night. Jace found Mara sitting on the steps of the general store, watching the last of the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "More than ready." They collected Theo, who'd finally run out of energy and was half asleep against Martha Yates' ample bosom, and loaded into the wagon. The ride back to the ranch was quiet but peaceful, the three of them crowded together on the bench seat. Theo dozed between them, while Mara and Jace watched the stars emerge one by one. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up," Mara said softly, "that this is all a dream, and I'm still locked in that sanatorium." "It's real. You're home." "Home," she repeated, tasting the word. "I didn't think I'd ever get to say that again." "Well, you can say it every day for the rest of your life if you want." He glanced at her. "Because you're staying, right? This isn't just temporary." "Where else would I go?" "I don't know. I just—" He stopped, struggling with the words. "I need to hear you say it. That you're staying. That you choose this. Us. I choose this," Mara said firmly. "I choose you and Theo and this valley and whatever life we can build together. I choose it all, Jace. Forever." His relief was visible even in the darkness. "Good. Because I've got plans." "Plans?" "For us, for the ranch, for the future." He grinned, the first real, unguarded grin she'd seen from him since her return. "Figure we've wasted enough time being apart. Time to make up for it." When they reached the ranch, Jace carried Theo straight up to bed while Mara lit lamps and stoked the fire. The house felt different now. Not like a museum of lost time, but like a home where people actually lived, where laughter echoed and love grew and families healed. Jace came back down and found her in the kitchen, staring at nothing. "You okay?" "I think so, just trying to process that it's really over." "It's over," he confirmed. "Crane's gone. The judge ruled in your favor. You're free." "Free," she whispered, then louder, testing it. "Free." Jace pulled her into his arms. "What do you want to do first with your freedom?" "This." She kissed him, soft and slow, a promise of all the tomorrows they'd almost lost. "Just this." They stood there in the warm kitchen, holding each other, while outside the November wind rattled the windows and the valley settled into darkness. Upstairs, Theo slept safe and sound. In town, their neighbors went about their evening routines. And somewhere on the road east, Dorian Crane rode toward whatever came next. But he was no longer their problem. That night, Mara slept in the master bedroom for the first time since her return. Jace had offered, hesitant and hopeful, and she'd accepted without hesitation. They lay in the big bed side by side, not touching yet, but aware of each other in every atom. "This feels strange," Mara admitted. "Good strange or bad strange?" "Good. Definitely good. Just new. We've been apart so long. We've got time to get used to it again." He rolled toward her. "Mara, I know we've been through hell. I know there's things we still need to talk about, wounds that need time to heal. But I want you to know I'm in this. All the way, for better or worse, like we promised 5 years ago." "For better or worse," she echoed. "I'm in it too." He kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. "Get some sleep. We've got the rest of our lives starting tomorrow." But sleep was slow to come. Mara lay in the darkness, listening to Jace's breathing even out beside her, and thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The kidnapping, the imprisonment, the escapes and recaptures, the final desperate run for freedom. And now this, lying safe in her own bed in her own house, with her own family sleeping under the same roof. She'd won. Against all odds, against the law itself, against a man with infinite resources and no conscience, she'd won. Just before she drifted off, she felt Jace's hand find hers in the darkness. Their fingers interlaced, and Mara fell asleep smiling. But in town, Dorian Crane was not sleeping. He sat in his hotel room, ignoring the marshal's order to leave by morning, and stared at the bottle of whiskey on the table. Everything he'd worked for, the perfect wife, the respectable marriage, the control he'd paid so dearly for, all of it was slipping away. He could accept that. He could walk away, return to Pittsburgh, find another woman to mold into what he wanted, or he could make sure that if he couldn't have her, nobody could. His hand moved to the telegram forms on the desk. He began to write, his penmanship precise and elegant even in his rage. By morning, men would be moving. Not hired guns this time, but professionals, the kind who didn't fail. Dorian Crane smiled into the darkness. The judge had ruled against him. The law had failed him. But the law was just one tool among many, and he had others. If Mara wanted to stay in Red Valley so badly, then Red Valley would become her tomb. He sealed the telegram and carried it downstairs to the night clerk, pressing coins into the man's palm. "Send this immediately. I don't care what time it is. Send it now." The clerk looked at the address, a private office in Denver, and nodded nervously. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." Dorian returned to his room, poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey, and drank to revenge. Back at the ranch, Mara woke suddenly, heart pounding for no reason she could name. She sat up, looking around the moonlit bedroom. Everything was peaceful. Jace slept beside her, Theo down the hall, the house quiet and still. But something felt wrong. A prickle at the back of her neck, an instinct honed by 4 years of captivity and narrow escapes. She rose and moved to the window. The valley stretched dark and silver under the moon. Nothing moved. Nothing threatened. But Mara couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there in the darkness, something was coming. She stood at the window until her feet grew cold, then climbed back into bed and pressed close to Jace's warmth. He murmured something in his sleep and wrapped an arm around her. "It's just paranoia," she told herself. "You're safe. You won. It's over." But as she finally drifted back to sleep, a single thought lingered. Dorian Crane had never lost anything in his life. He wouldn't start now, and she was right. The storm was coming. It would arrive in 3 days, with fire and fury and the absolute conviction of a man who believed he owned everything he touched. But for tonight, for this one perfect night, Mara Holloway was home and safe and loved. And that would have to be enough. The fire started just after midnight on the 3rd night. Mara woke to the smell of smoke and the frantic barking of Biscuit down by the barn. For one confused moment she thought she was back in Pittsburgh, back in the sanatorium where they sometimes punished difficult patients by filling their rooms with acrid smoke. Then Jace was shaking her shoulder, his voice urgent. "Mara, get up. The barn's on fire." She was on her feet and running before she was fully conscious, pulling a robe over her nightgown as she followed Jace down the stairs. Through the kitchen window, she could see orange flames licking up the side of the barn, hungry and bright against the black sky. Theo stood at the bottom of the stairs in his nightshirt, eyes wide with terror. "The horses," he whimpered. "Mama, the horses are in there." Jace was already pulling on his boots. "Mara, take Theo and get to the Brennans right now." I'm not leaving you to fight this alone. This isn't a request." His voice cracked with urgency. "Someone set this fire. It's not an accident. You need to get our son to safety while I deal with it." The words hit like cold water. Someone set this fire, Dorian. It had to be Dorian. Jace, if he's here, all the more reason to get Theo away. Please, Mara, I can't fight this if I'm worried about you. She wanted to argue, wanted to stay and help, but one look at Theo's terrified face made the decision for her. She scooped him up despite his size, grabbed the rifle from beside the door, and ran. The night was cold and clear, stars brilliant overhead, the smell of smoke already spreading on the wind. Behind her she heard Jace shouting, the panicked whinnying of horses, the ominous crackle of flames eating dry wood. She ran across the dark pasture toward the Brennan ranch, Theo bouncing against her hip, praying she wouldn't stumble in a gopher hole or trip over unseen rocks. She was halfway there when she heard the horse behind her. Mara spun, raising the rifle one-handed while keeping Theo on her hip. A rider emerged from the darkness, and for one heart-stopping moment she thought it was Dorian. Then the voice called out, "Mrs. Holloway, it's Marshal Davies." The federal marshal pulled his horse alongside her. "Get on. I'll take you to safety." "The barn's on fire. Jace is alone." "I know. I saw the flames and came as fast as I could. Let me get you and the boy somewhere safe, then I'll go back and help your husband." He reached down. "Come on, ma'am. No time to waste." Mara hesitated for only a second, then grabbed his hand and let him pull her and Theo up behind him. They galloped through the darkness, and within minutes the Brennan ranch appeared. Tom was already out front, rifle in hand, having seen the flames. "Take them inside," Davies ordered, practically lifting Theo down. "Keep them safe. I'm going back to help Holloway." "I'm coming with you," Tom said. "Me too," called Vernon Cross, emerging from the darkness with 3 other ranchers. "Saw the smoke from my place." "Who did this?" "My money's on Crane," Davies said grimly. "He left town 3 days ago like I ordered, but that doesn't mean he didn't leave men behind. Come on." They rode off into the darkness, leaving Mara standing in the Brennan yard with Theo in her arms and her heart in her throat. Mrs. Brennan appeared in the doorway. "Come inside, honey. Nothing you can do out here but worry." But Mara couldn't move, couldn't look away from the orange glow on the horizon that marked her home burning. Theo buried his face in her shoulder. "Is Daddy going to be okay?" "Of course he is," Mara said with more confidence than she felt. "Your daddy's the strongest, bravest man in this valley. A little fire isn't going to stop him." At the ranch, Jace was fighting a losing battle. The fire had spread from the barn to the hay storage, and sparks were jumping to the roof of the house. He'd managed to get the horses out, all 7 of them now running loose in the pasture, Storm among them, but the barn itself was lost. He turned his attention to the house, hauling bucket after bucket from the well, throwing water on the roof and sides, trying to create a wet barrier the flames couldn't cross. He was losing. Then Tom and the marshal and half a dozen ranchers thundered into the yard, and suddenly he had help. They formed a bucket line from the well to the house, passing water hand to hand, soaking everything they could reach. Someone rode to the creek and back with more water. Someone else started beating at small fires with wet blankets. Davies grabbed Jace's shoulder. "Where's Crane?" "I don't know. Haven't seen him." This was deliberate, professional. Whoever set this knew what they were doing. "I figured." Jace threw another bucket of water on the porch roof. "Question is, are they still here?" As if in answer, a shot rang out. Everyone dropped, water splashing everywhere. The bullet had taken a chunk out of the porch post, exactly where Jace's head had been a moment before. "In the trees!" Vernon shouted. "North side!" More shots, a deadly rain of lead that sent the men scrambling for cover. Jace grabbed his rifle from where he'd leaned it against the wall and returned fire into the darkness. Beside him, Tom did the same, and Davies and Vernon. The air filled with the sharp crack of gunfire and the acrid smell of powder mixing with smoke. "How many you think?" Tom shouted over the noise. "At least 3, Davies called back. "Maybe more. Professional shooters, too. Those weren't warning shots." Jace's mind raced. The house was still in danger. The barn was gone. And now they were pinned down by gunmen in the dark. If they couldn't put out the house fire soon, they'd lose everything. And Dorian, because it had to be Dorian behind this, would have succeeded in destroying not just Mara's refuge, but the whole ranch that represented their life together. "We need to split up," Jace said. "Half keep fighting the fire, half drive off the shooters." "You're the one they're trying to kill," Davies pointed out. "You stay here, behind cover. Tom, Vernon, come with me. We'll flank them." They moved off into the darkness, while Jace and the remaining ranchers kept up covering fire. The flames were spreading despite their efforts, reaching the main house now, eating at the wooden siding. Jace felt despair clawing at him. They were going to lose. After everything, after winning in court, after getting Mara back, they were going to lose their home to a man who couldn't accept defeat. Then he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. Hoofbeats. Coming fast. From the south. More of Crane's men? Or help? The rider burst into the firelight and Jace's heart stopped. It was Mara, riding Storm bareback, her nightgown and robe streaming behind her, hair wild, eyes blazing with fury and determination. She had a rifle across her lap. "What the hell are you doing?" Jace roared. "Helping!" She slid off Storm and grabbed a bucket. "Theo's safe with the Brennans. Mrs. Brennan's got a shotgun and knows how to use it. I'm not hiding while you lose everything." "Mara, there are shooters." "I know. I can hear them." She threw water on the house with vicious efficiency. "So let's put out this fire and deal with them." There was no time to argue. Jace just grabbed another bucket and worked beside her, marveling despite everything at this woman who'd survived 4 years of hell and come out the other side stronger than steel. In the trees, Davies and his group had found the shooters, 3 men with expensive rifles and cold eyes, clearly professionals who'd been paid well to kill Jace Holloway and destroy his ranch. But they hadn't counted on facing down angry ranchers who knew every inch of this land. Tom Brennan came at them from the left, while Vernon circled right, and Davies charged straight up the middle. The gunfight was brief and brutal. When it ended, 1 shooter was dead, 1 wounded and disarmed, and the 3rd had surrendered with his hands up. "Where's Crane?" Davies demanded, his gun pressed to the surrendering man's head. "Don't know. We were just hired to do a job." "By who?" "Lawyer named Pemberton. Paid us to burn the ranch and kill the rancher. Said it was a property dispute." The man spat blood. "Didn't say nothing about facing down half the valley." Davies zip-tied him and dragged him back toward the ranch, where the fire was finally, starting to come under control. The barn was lost, smoking ruins that would need to be completely rebuilt. But the house had been saved, its sides scorched and blackened, but intact. Jace stood in the middle of the yard, soot-covered and exhausted, with Mara beside him in the same condition. When he saw Davies dragging the prisoner, something dark and furious crossed his face. "This one of Crane's men?" "Hired gun. Says Pemberton paid him." Davies shoved the man to his knees. "Going to testify to that in court?" "I ain't testifying to nothing." "Your choice, but you just tried to kill a federal witness. That's a hanging offense, so you can testify against the men who hired you, or you can dance at the end of a rope. What's it going to be?" The man looked at Jace's cold face, at the burned barn, at Mara standing fierce and unbroken, and apparently decided his employers weren't worth dying for. "I'll talk." Dawn was breaking pink and gold over the mountains by the time Sheriff Pritchard arrived with a wagon to take the prisoners to town. Doc Harrison came too, summoned by someone, and treated the wounded shooter with professional detachment before declaring him fit for jail. The yard was full of neighbors now. Word had spread fast, and people kept arriving to help. Women brought food and coffee. Men started clearing debris from the barn. Children played with Theo, who'd been brought back once the danger passed, and was now showing everyone his burned stick collection. Mara stood on the porch of the scorched house, wrapped in a borrowed coat, watching the sun rise over the valley. She felt hollowed out, exhausted beyond measure, but also strangely alive. They'd survived. The house stood. Her family was intact. Jace found her there, pressing a cup of hot coffee into her hands. "You should be furious with me," Mara said quietly. "This is my fault. Dorian did this because of me." "Don't." His voice was firm. "This is Crane's fault, nobody else's. He's a monster who can't accept that he doesn't own you." He pulled her close. "And you riding back here on Storm like some avenging angel? That was the bravest damn thing I've ever seen. Or the stupidest. Maybe both." He kissed the top of her head. "But it's one of the reasons I love you." Sheriff Pritchard climbed the porch steps, looking grim. Jace, Mara, we need to talk. They followed him to the kitchen, where he spread out a map on the table. The prisoners are talking. Turns out Crane didn't leave the area like the marshal ordered. He's holed up in an old line shack about 15 miles north of here, waiting for news of the fire. He tapped the map. We're going to arrest him, today, before he can run or hire more killers. I'm coming, Jace said immediately. Figured you would. Tom and Vernon want in too, plus the marshal and his deputies. Going to be a whole party. He looked at Mara. Question is, what do we do with you? Keep me safe, she said. That's what Dorian's afraid of, that I'll be around to testify against him. So keep me alive and let the law handle the rest. You sure you don't want to come? Face him down? Mara thought about it. Part of her wanted to be there when they dragged Dorian Crane out in chains, wanted to see his face when he realized he'd finally, truly lost. But another part, the part that had survived by being smart, not reckless, knew her place was here. I'll face him in court, she said. Under oath. Where my words have power and his money can't save him, that's where I'll win. Pritchard nodded approvingly. Smart woman. All right, we'll leave a couple of men here to guard the ranch, just in case. Rest of us will ride out within the hour. After he left, Mara turned to Jace. Be careful. Please. Always am. He cupped her face in his hands. This ends today, one way or another. And then we get to start actually living our lives. I'd like that. He kissed her, deep and thorough, a promise of all the tomorrows they'd fought so hard to claim. Then he was gone, riding north with a posse of angry ranchers and determined lawmen, leaving Mara to wait and hope and pray. The line shack was a miserable place, barely more than 4 walls and a roof used by cowboys during winter range rides. Dorian Crane sat inside, drinking whiskey from a silver flask, while his lawyer Pemberton paced nervously by the window. They should have reported back hours ago, Pemberton said. Perhaps they're being thorough. Or perhaps they failed. The lawyer's voice was tight. This was a mistake, Dorian. Hiring killers, burning property. This goes beyond recovering your wife. This is attempted murder. She's not my wife anymore, remember? That idiot judge saw to that. Dorian took another drink. So now she's just a woman who embarrassed me. Made me look weak. Took something that belonged to me. She's a human being. She's mine. The words came out as a snarl. I paid for her. I owned her. And if I can't have her, then I'll make sure Holloway doesn't either. It's a matter of principle. Pemberton stared at him with dawning horror. You're insane. No, counselor. I'm just a man who understands that some things are worth more than money. Reputation. Pride. The satisfaction of knowing your enemies suffer. He smiled. When I hear Holloway's ranch burned to the ground with him in it, I'll ride back to Pittsburgh and forget Mara Kent ever existed. But not before. The lawyer was opening his mouth to respond when the door crashed open and Davies stormed in, gun drawn, with Jace and a half-dozen others behind him. Dorian Crane, you're under arrest for attempted murder, arson, and conspiracy to commit murder. Dorian stood slowly, setting down his flask with deliberate care. On what evidence? Your hired guns. They're singing like canaries. Told us everything, how Pemberton hired them on your orders, how you planned the whole thing, how you've been hiding up here waiting for news. Davies smiled coldly. It's over, Crane. For a long moment, Dorian just stared. Then something in him snapped. He lunged for Jace with a roar of pure rage, his hands going for the rancher's throat. Jace sidestepped and drove his fist into Dorian's face with 4 years of fury behind it. The steel magnate went down hard, blood streaming from his broken nose. That's for taking my wife, Jace said. And this? He kicked Dorian in the ribs, not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to hurt. That's for trying to kill me and destroy my home. Davies pulled him back before he could do more damage. Easy, Holloway. We need him alive to stand trial. They hauled Dorian to his feet and cuffed him while Pemberton stood frozen, watching his client and his career both go up in smoke. Davies turned to the lawyer. You're under arrest too. Accessory to attempted murder. I didn't know. I only hired them to... Pemberton's voice rose to a panicked squeak. I want immunity. I'll testify against Crane. I'll tell you everything. Shut up, you fool, Dorian snarled, but it was too late. The damage was done. By the time they rode back to Red Valley with both men in custody, Pemberton had confessed everything. The bribes, the forged documents, the payoffs to doctors, all of it. He'd turned on Dorian Crane with the speed of a rat, abandoning a sinking ship. At the ranch, Mara was helping clear debris when she heard the horses. She looked up to see the posse returning, Dorian and Pemberton tied to their saddles, Jace riding tall and unharmed at the front. Relief flooded through her so powerful she had to sit down. Theo ran to meet them. "Daddy, did you catch the bad men?" "We caught them, bud." Jace dismounted and scooped up his son. "They're going to jail for a very long time." Mara walked over slowly, looking at Dorian. The once immaculate steel magnate was filthy, bloody, and broken. When he saw her, hatred blazed in his eyes. "This isn't over," he spat. "I have lawyers, resources. I'll appeal. You'll hang," Davies interrupted, "or spend the rest of your life in federal prison. Take your pick. Either way, you're never seeing daylight as a free man again." Mara stepped closer, close enough to smell the blood and sweat and fear on him. "You were right about one thing," she said quietly. "I was yours. For 4 years you owned me. But not anymore. I took myself back, and you lost. Completely, utterly, forever." She smiled. "That's got to hurt worse than anything Jace did to you." Dorian lunged at her, but the ropes held. He screamed curses, threats, promises of revenge, but they were empty, and everyone knew it. He was finished. Sheriff Pritchard hauled him away, still screaming, while Pemberton followed meekly, already calculating how much of a sentence reduction he could get for testifying. The crowd watched them go in silence, then erupted into cheers. It was finally, truly over. The next week passed in a blur of depositions and legal proceedings. Judge Cartwright returned to hear the new evidence, declared the entire case against Mara null and void, and issued arrest warrants for Silas Kent on charges of kidnapping and human trafficking. Federal marshals were dispatched to Denver to bring him in. Dorian Crane was formally charged with multiple crimes and held without bail pending trial. But for Mara, Jace, and Theo, life began to return to something resembling normal. They rebuilt the barn with help from neighbors, a new structure that was bigger and sturdier than the old one. They repaired the scorched side of the house and repainted it. They worked together from dawn to dusk, building not just structures, but a life. One evening, 3 weeks after the fire, Jace found Mara standing in the newly finished barn, running her hand along Storm's neck. The gray mare had taken to following Mara everywhere, as if making up for lost time. "You thinking about everything that happened?" Jace asked. "Everything I survived, everything we survived together." She turned to him. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something else to go wrong." "Nothing's going to go wrong. Crane's locked up, your father's on the run, and we've got the best neighbors in the world watching our backs." He pulled her close. "You're safe, Mara. Finally. Really safe. You can stop running now." "I don't know how." "Then I'll teach you." He kissed her forehead. "Starting right now. Come with me." He led her outside where Theo waited with an impish grin and Mr. Flop tucked under his arm. The three of them walked to the creek that ran through their property, where the aspens were turning gold and the water ran clear over smooth stones. "What are we doing?" Mara asked. "Starting over." Jace pulled out a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal 2 simple gold bands. "These were my grandparents' wedding rings. I've been carrying them around, waiting for the right moment, and I figure—" He dropped to one knee. "I figure now's as good a time as any. Mara Kent Holloway, will you marry me? Again? Properly this time with all our friends here. No guns or force or fear, just us and our family and a fresh start?" Mara's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, God, yes." Theo cheered and threw Mr. Flop in the air. "We get to have a wedding. Can I wear my fancy shirt?" "You can wear whatever you want, bud." They planned it for the first Saturday of winter, when the first real snow had fallen and transformed the valley into something out of a fairy tale. The entire town turned out. People crammed into the little church, spilling out onto the steps and into the street. Martha Yates had organized the whole thing with military precision. Eleanor Henderson had made a dress that actually fit and flowed like water instead of hanging like a shroud. And Doc Harrison had volunteered to give Mara away since her father was wanted by the law and her mother was long dead. Mara walked down the aisle in a dress of soft cream wool with lace at the collar and sleeves, her hair crowned with winter berries and evergreen. Theo went ahead of her, carrying Mr. Flop in a small pillow with the rings tied on. And at the front, next to the preacher, stood Jace in his best suit, looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. The ceremony was simple and perfect. They spoke vows they'd written themselves, promising not just to love and honor, but to fight for each other, to stand together against whatever came, to build a life worth all the struggle it had taken to get here. When the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," Jace pulled her close and kissed her like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment, because he had. They all had. The reception was held at the town hall, transformed with evergreen garlands and hundreds of candles. There was dancing and food and terrible jokes and toasts that went on far too long. Theo fell asleep on a bench with Mr. Flop and 3 pieces of cake in his stomach. Storm was brought to the door so Mara could give her a piece of the wedding cake, and the mayor ate it delicately while the crowd laughed and cheered. As midnight approached, Jace and Mara slipped away from the celebration. They walked through the snow-covered town, hand in hand, to where their wagon waited. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Holloway?" Jace asked. "More than ready, Mr. Holloway." They drove through the winter night, their breath steaming in the cold air, the stars brilliant overhead. At the ranch, they carried sleeping Theo inside and tucked him into bed. Then they stood in their bedroom, shared and claimed, and looked at each other. "I can't believe we're really here," Mara whispered. "After everything, we made it." "We did." Jace pulled her close. "And we're going to keep making it, every day, for the rest of our lives." They made love that night with the tenderness of people who'd almost lost each other and the passion of people who refused to waste a single moment. Afterward, they lay tangled together, listening to the wind outside and the soft sounds of their home settling around them. "What do you think happens now?" Mara asked. "Now that the fighting's over?" "We live," Jace said simply. "We raise our son. We work the ranch. We watch the seasons change. We grow old together." He paused. "We get to be boring." Boring sounds perfect. And it was. The months that followed brought news from the outside world. Dorian Crane was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Silas Kent was caught trying to flee to Mexico and faced trial for kidnapping and fraud. Pemberton turned state's evidence and got a reduced sentence but was disbarred and disappeared into obscurity. The network of doctors and sanitarium owners who'd participated in imprisoning Mara and dozens of other inconvenient women was exposed and dismantled. But in Red Valley, life went on in the best possible way. Spring came, and with it the planting of gardens and the birth of foals. Summer brought long days of work and longer evenings of rest. Autumn saw the harvests and the first frost and Theo starting school, where he told everyone about his mama who'd fought bad men and won. Winter came again, completing the circle, and on a cold December morning, Mara woke to find Jace watching her with soft eyes. "What?" she asked, smiling. "Just thinking about how lucky I am. That you came back, that you fought so hard, that we get this. I'm the lucky one." She kissed him. "I could have died in that sanatorium, could have given up, could have believed Dorian when he said I was crazy. But I didn't. And I got this, got you and Theo and Storm and this valley and this life." "You got what you earned," Jace corrected, "by being the strongest, bravest person I know." Later that day, they all rode out together. Jace on his big bay, Theo on his pony Betty, and Mara on Storm. They rode to the high meadow, where the valley spread below them like a promise, all gold and brown and white under the winter sun. Theo galloped ahead, laughing, while Biscuit ran beside him. Mara pulled Storm to a stop and just looked at her son, at her husband, at the land that had become her refuge and redemption. "You okay?" Jace asked, pulling up beside her. "Better than okay?" She turned to him, her eyes bright. "I'm home. Really, truly home. Not just the place, but the feeling, the belonging, the peace." She took a deep breath. "I'm not running anymore, Jace. I'm not hiding. I'm not afraid. I'm just here, present, living." "Yeah." He reached over and took her hand. You are. They sat like that for a long moment. Two people who'd been broken and had found each other and had somehow, against all odds, made themselves whole again. Below them, Theo called out that he'd found rabbit tracks. Storm shifted beneath Mara, eager to run. The sun blazed cold and clear above the mountains. And Mara Holloway smiled, squeezed her husband's hand, and rode down to join her son. Because this was her life now. Not perfect, not easy, but hers. Chosen and claimed and fought for. A life built on love and courage and the absolute refusal to let evil win. She'd been taken from this valley 4 years ago, a young mother torn from her family in the dead of night. She'd been imprisoned, drugged, beaten down, and told she was nothing. She'd survived horrors that should have broken her. But she hadn't broken. She'd endured. She'd escaped. She'd found her way home. And now, riding across the snow-covered meadow with her husband and son, hearing their laughter echo off the mountains, feeling the warmth of the winter sun on her face. Now Mara knew what victory truly meant. Not the courtroom ruling or the sentencing of her captors, not even the wedding that had made her marriage real again. Victory was this, a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy, a family reunited, a woman who'd been told she was worthless proving that she was worth everything. As they rode back toward the ranch at sunset, Mara looked up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky and whispered a prayer of gratitude. For second chances. For strength when she'd needed it most. For neighbors who'd become family. For a man who'd loved her enough to wait and fight and forgive. For a little boy who called her mama without hesitation. For a life that was finally, truly, beautifully hers. That night, after Theo was asleep and the house was quiet, Mara stood at the kitchen window looking out at the valley. Jace came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing. How far we've come." She leaned back against him. "How many times I almost didn't make it. How close we came to losing everything. But we didn't lose. We won." "We won," she repeated, feeling the truth of it settle into her bones. "We really did." Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle, covering the scars left by the fire, blanketing the valley in white. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, fences to mend, cattle to feed, a ranch to run. But tonight was for peace, for gratitude, for love. Mara turned in Jace's arms and kissed him, slow and sweet, a promise renewed with every breath. This was her home. This was her family. This was her life. And nobody, not Dorian Crane, not her father, not all the forces of law and money and cruelty combined, could ever take it from her again. She was free. She was home. She was whole. And that was everything. The end. 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 The end.